And
All set,
good evening. I'd like to call this regularly scheduled meeting for the Marquette Township Board to order. It is Tuesday, November 19th, 2013 at 7 p.m. If you'd all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk Katari, roll call, please.
Trustee Prescott is excused and absent tonight. She is not able to attend. Trustee LaRue.
Here.
Trustee Pomfret.
Here.
Trustee Durant.
Here.
Treasurer Johnson.
Here.
Secretary is here, and Supervisor Leamington.
Here.
Staff present is Manager Gerard, Superintendent Page, Dave Wiegand, and John Marks, and Dave's on the Road Committee and Recreation Committee, and John Marks is the ZBA Chair. Correct?
Thank you.
Okay.
Next item on our agenda is approval of the consent agenda. As you know, the consent agenda is put together for those items that are not requiring immediate board approval. This evening's includes the approval of prior meeting minutes of October 18th, November 4th, and November 6th, 2013, and closed session minutes of November 4th, 2013. Also received committee and other reports. The Roads Committee draft meeting minutes of November 6th, the Sheriff's report for October, the Fire Marshal's report for October. Correspondence not requiring board action was a notification from the Accident Fund Workers' Compensation Dividend, as well as the Marquette County Township Association Christmas Potluck Invitation for December 4th, 2013. Included in this evening's consent agenda are bills payable presented in the amount of $435,548. Anyone wishing to remove anything from the consent agenda for addition to the regular agenda? Seeing
Motion
none?
to approve.
Support.
May I ask something? One of the bills that are going to be in that consent agenda, I'm a township resident, will be payable for a hot water heater replacement as a result to a main. And I would actually like to contribute some money to that, so I'm asking if that check could be removed, that you're going to pay tonight, if it is in those bill numbers, and remove that from the consent agenda.
Yeah, although I don't know that we need to remove it to have that discussion. If it's something that you want to do, we can probably just take care of it during public comment if it's.
Okay, then we'll do it then.
Okay. We have a motion and support to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Who seconded that? I know Trustee
Ernie.
did.
Next item on our agenda is approval of the agenda. Anyone wishing to make any changes to the remainder of the agenda as presented? Clerk Rattari?
I would just like to add under new business, the meeting time of December 3rd. I just have a discussion about that. Possibly move it back because it's the same evening as our tree lighting, so maybe move it back to 7:30 possibly.
Okay.
We'll have that discussion. So I'll move that we add that to the agenda under new business.
And it will be 10E.
10E.
That's the manager's report.
Well, that's my
Okay.
printed agenda at home.
Anything else?
Need a second.
10E.
Second.
To add that to the agenda and approve the agenda.
Okay.
Changing the meeting time to 7:30, December 3rd.
You want to make the motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Well, there's a motion right now to add 10E as new business.
Okay, so if there's no other discussion, all those in favor of the addition of item number 10E, discussion of the meeting time for the meeting of 12:03, all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. It's-
Okay, now I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Agenda is approved as amended. Next item on our agenda is public comment. Those members of the public wishing to address the board may do so at this time. If you just come up to the podium.
I would ask for people at public comment, speak directly into the microphone as close as you can, and that will help with the recording on the video.
If you just start with your first and last name.
Hi, my name is Michael Sauer. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
And I live at 2373 West Fair Avenue. Back on November 5th, the Public Works was doing some work on a water main near our house, and when the water came back on, there was a breach in our hot water heater. And after a couple visits from Kirk's workers, Dave and Barry, that they decided to replace our hot water heater, which was a 1988 water heater. While ultimately I feel like the water hammering that occurred when the main was turned back on was responsible for that. I just feel that we should be partially responsible for paying for that replacement as well. So I would like to offer to pay $150 towards that replacement. I believe the hot water heater was $350 in that area. And just like to thank Kirk and Dave and Barry. This is the second time we've really had exemplary service from Public Works. The other time was on Easter Sunday when our grinder pump went out, and we had someone there and had it fixed with 12 people in our house in 15 minutes. So just a happy, proud Marquette Township resident, and wanted to thank Kirk and the board for running a good ship.
Thank you, Mr. Sauer. If 150. If you wanted to go, yeah, I saw it. If you wanted to do that, I think you make the check out to Marquette Township, and then Randy will direct Lois to direct it back to Public Works.
Credit to Public Works.
Okay,
That would be
Okay.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your kind comments about the service. Any other public comment this evening?
Thank you.
Seeing none, we will close public comment, move to the first board member comment. Those members of the board wishing to make comment may do so at this time. Pete?
Just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, because we won't have a meeting until after.
Dan, anything? No. Clerk Jari?
Happy Thanksgiving, and be careful in the woods, it's still hunting season.
Ernie?
I have nothing.
Lynn?
Nope, thank you.
Wow, that was quick. Good luck hunting, everybody. And certainly happy Thanksgiving. We'll close board member comment if there's nothing else. There's no first forum discussion. We'll move into agenda item number 9A, Township Facilities Construction Update. Manager Gerard.
Not a whole lot to report. Work is ongoing at the township facilities. Most of the subsurface work has been completed. Kirk Page is here. I'll let Kirk make any comments that he would wish to make, but Bromley, or either Bromley or Jim are here this evening to talk with you. There's really nothing of any unusual occurring or ongoing in the process. Kirk, is there anything you'd like to report on the project?
No, not much additional. The work is proceeding. There's still ongoing concrete work. But you know, they're working in the bad weather, the good weather, and so progress is good. We actually just got our first bill. We are going to be totally responsible for the testing, materials testing on the project. So, and also we're going to be responsible for the communication systems and also the interior furnishings. So far we've only gotten the first bill, which will be on your next agenda.
The remaining furnishings over at the former township hall are going to be transferred over there to accommodate some of that.
Okay. Any questions? Dan?
Now that the township hall and the fire hall are completed and we've done last payments on both, can we get a total cost for both buildings separated for construction as well as anything else put in there, so you know what the total cost is for both those buildings?
Absolutely.
There still are a couple of bills that are outstanding. Lois is tracking those, and as soon as she gets those in, she'll be completing that.
That includes the construction and fixtures and everything.
Yes, it'll be a
Construction,
total cost.
fixtures.
Total cost. Couple of items, for instance, a couple of the items, the baby changing stations in the restrooms haven't been installed here yet. They're being put in tomorrow. You know, small items like that are coming along. So it'll be relatively small bills, but once those are completed, the whole list will be provided to the board.
Thanks, Randy. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to new business. Agenda item number 10A, consider budget amendment number 2013-14. Clerk Rattari.
Sent to the board budget amendment 2013-14. Like always, it will be referenced in the minutes. And the highlight of that budget amendment is the authorization to request to reclassify expenditures in the water fund due to the litigation fees in the Hargrove case. Current legal billings as well as anticipated ones will necessitate this action. And it's a $50,000 change. And move that.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Question?
Go ahead.
I had emailed Clerk Rattari asking what account he thought that might come out of, because we've been talking about the retained earnings account and earmarked funds, if you want to call them that, that aren't, apparently now aren't, written in stone. They're just for gauging purposes. So I'm kind of wondering which project is going to be affected by the 50,000.
I would say, I'll have Kirk answer the question. Per usual, it's going to be determined by Superintendent Page and Lois. And I would imagine that rather than it comes out of one fund, it will come out of several funds. But Kirk, do you want to speak to that? She's asking what of the earmarked funds, is there one that you anticipate that you would be moving the $50,000 out of replacement improvement and into administration? Which of those earmarked funds from replacement improvement you would be taking the $50,000 out?
I can't really say at this time, but it is coming out of the one line item, which, has been approved by the board. The information that I've been giving you on the breakout of those funds, it's been informational, and the only other option would be to actually, on the priority list, on the bottom of that list is actually called Other, and the only other expenses we have would be the contribution to the general fund, which has already been made. So unless you want to give that back, then
No, I think you're
we just have to
taking
make a decision, when the time comes.
Right.
Which is what I do every year anyway. I mean, it's there's a priority list, but it's based on opportunity. Timing is critical for everything that happens, because I have to get permits. And plus, I have to be flexible because priorities have to change. Sometimes they change. So I can't say definitively right now which specific fund might be impacted. So.
Thank you.
Other comment? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve a resolution to reclassify expenditures in the water fund. Clerk Rattari?
Clerk Rattari is yes. Trustee LaRue?
Yes.
Trustee Pompano?
Yes.
Trustee Durant?
Yes?
Treasurer Johnson?
Yes.
And Supervisor Leamata?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. The next item on your agenda is 10B. Consider the proposal for preliminary engineering study for low-pressure sewer system to serve Northwest Trowbridge. Superintendent Page, probably should have just had you stay up there. We're going to want you back up at the podium. You do have a transmittal in your package dated November 13th from Superintendent Page, RE the proposal for preliminary engineering study. He does have attached a proposal from North Country Engineering to update the 2010 study, which provided preliminary design and cost estimates for the construction of a low-pressure sewer collection system for the unsewered northwest portion of Trowbridge Park. Since 2010, we have constructed Phase 1 and obtained a permit for Phase 2, which will be constructed next year. I'm requesting an update of the previous study as well as updated cost estimates for design and construction engineering services and construction costs for the remaining project area. The total proposed cost of the engineering report is $3,980. I respectfully recommend acceptance of the proposal. Anything to add, Kirk?
No, other than I did put the project information sheet on your your table there. Sorry, I forgot that for the packet. But basically, it's pretty straightforward. It's really another attempt to basically update, our anticipated future costs, which is what we all seem to be struggling with during this budget process. There was a study done in 2010, but since then, we've had one project completed. And I actually just recently received a project for Phase 2, which now it's too late to construct, so that's going to have to be deferred to next year. So basically, I just wanted to have a better feel for, what the cost is going to be for this particular project. We're doing the same thing that you've already approved, another study to look at water and sewer on Vandenboom, South Vandenboom, Grove Street, and Grandview Circle. So it's basically for the same reasons. I just want to get a better handle on, what costs are going to be. Because a lot of these, you make predictions on cost, you get engineers' estimates, but sometimes they're way down the road, and they're usually accurate, but it's also based on more or less a general layout. So in some cases, the layout may change. So like your preliminary engineering will, would sometimes change, the cost. So I'm just striving to, be a little bit more accurate. Polishing the crystal ball, I guess, is basically what I'm trying to do here.
Thanks, Kurt. Questions for Kurt? Dan?
I'm kind of confused because in May, didn't we authorize $15,255 for engineering for water and sewer, I'm assuming, on Vandenboom up to Norwood?
It wasn't $50,000, but yes,
$15,000, like $255.
correct. That's Phase 2. That's correct.
And this,
And that's been done, and that's still valid. That's the project that
that's the project you said we're going to
we're going to defer.
We're starting this project next year, is that what you said?
Correct, yes.
And this one then is all the rest of Trowbridge, I'm assuming?
Right.
I guess okay. So this one here isn't nearly as detailed as this one is, the one in May, right? I mean, I'm looking
Correct.
at 15,000 for
Right,
just
yeah.
up at Norwood, and only
Yep.
3,000 for.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I think one was for engineering, the actual engineering work, and this is just update costs.
Right. Yep. Because actually, the very first project we did, Phase 1, was already different. It was actually a different segment. We routed it differently than we had looked at 2010. That's one where we basically extended up Vandenboom, but our connection, we went west to connect to the Cedarville main. So that's kind of my point, things change.
Okay. That answer your question, Dan? Anyone else? Ernie?
Can you explain Phase 2? What is Phase 2 going to be?
What is it going to be?
Yes.
Phase 2 is going to be basically starting at the lift station, the Center Street lift station, heading east on Center Street, and then going north on Vandenboom, and south on Vandenboom to match up with Phase 1. So in Phase 1, we went north on Vandenboom to the creek, okay? Phase 2, we're continuing north, but we're jumping over the creek. So they're going in opposite directions, and we don't have to make the stream crossing. And then we're going north on Vandenboom as far as, I believe, Norwood. And then, of course, all the side streets to the west.
This is the actual construction of sewer lines?
Correct, yes.
Now, how is this going to actually be paid for overall?
People that connect are going to be, they're going to pay connection fees, and they're going to pay lateral benefit charge, which is equal to their proportional cost of construction.
This may have been discussed before. Do we have any idea what percentage of them will be hooking up?
Ultimately, 100% is going to be hooked up. And that's something that we do need to talk about again in the future. But right now, it's if property changes ownership, if a septic system fails, or new construction, on a vacant lot.
Treasurer Johnson. Historically, what's happened with these things, similar to water projects, basically, you have an option with the sewer system, you have an option to connect. And basically, as Clerk mentioned, what the requirement is, if you choose not to connect now, the requirement then is that when your property, when and if it changes hands, it must connect at that time, or if your septic system fails, it must connect at that time, it must be operating in the septic system. So what Clerk is saying is over time, septic systems they will fail, so it will be eventually 100%. But the incentive for folks to connect now is it's a lower cost now. There's a fixed cost at this point if they connect, every year that cost goes up.
Do we have the dollars set aside to do this before we start receiving dollars from the,
That's where the grant funds come from, basically. The grant funds are in place to fund it, and then we repay that as they connect.
Well, basically, in this case, that's coming out of that replacement and improvement fund. So that is a line item on
Like
the
money's
sewer
Putting aside.
spreadsheet.
so you have sufficient, you feel, dollars there to do it? But right now, you're looking
Right now.
for an updated cost
Right.
for it?
Yep.
See, these
For
are some of
phase
the things
three.
we ask why there's like $1 million sitting in a fund.
Yeah.
That's how we fund it.
And another thing about being flexible and reprioritizing, I mean, so far it's been based on need. So in other words, someone will have a failing septic, and that's, if we can, that's why we, that basically determines that project. If we can go at least that far. And then,
And in that case, the cost is borne by the individual, full cost.
Now, the other question I have, I don't have a map in front of me to see it, but the septic systems usually run down the center of the road. Is that true on this one too? So, because what I'm thinking about.
You mean the sewer?
redoing
Sewer.
The actual road, not the sewer,
You mean sewer lines? Yeah.
sewer line.
Well,
no,
Go ahead.
they're actually on the edge of the road.
Okay.
And in fact, that's one of the things that we're looking at with the current project, and we're going to change our specifications. We are planning to directional bore as much as we can. We were previously just going to directional bore underneath road crossings. Okay, so if your house was on the opposite side of the street, we'd bore under the road. And the mains, we would open trench until we got to an intersection, then we would bore under the road. We're looking very strongly at boring the whole thing, directional bore, because it's just a better way to build. You end up with a better system. The problem is with a small diameter, once ductile iron is like the most common material for force mains, but when you get below like 4 inches, you can't get ductile iron in that size. So it's difficult to find a material that is they're reliable, but they're just more problems. When you, like, a lot of our pressure sewers right now are like glue joints, which is it's just more difficult underground. So basically, it's a different material. It's easier insulation, less. It's actually less costly because you have less surface restoration because you're basically boring under everything. Of course, you still have to dig holes at points where you have connections to do two different lines, but that's a lot less costly than continuous open trenching.
It's a solid line that you're putting through there. then.
Correct. Yep.
Solid lines are less pervious.
Yeah.
So fewer joints, just longer lasting material, just it's better all around.
Really, it's a solid line to each connection.
Right. Yep. And it's becoming You know, we put our first pressure sewers in like just 20 years ago. So that technology has really evolved. So it used to be pretty difficult to find, you know, local contractors that could do that kind of work. Because it's actually, where you do have joints, they're actually fuse welded, you know, so now there are, I'm gonna say 2 or 3, you know, in this, in the mid-UP, so it's more common.
Is that it, Ernie?
Yeah.
Any other questions in regards to the actual request for give Kirk the authorization to move forward on the preliminary engineering study to serve Northwest Trowbridge?
Could I ask one question of the size of boring going underneath the ground, underneath the pavement? What size are you gonna be boring across? Is that different from the first time we did it?
Right, the sizing is based on the location. The preliminary layout that we had, there has been some, you know, preliminary engineering. These low-pressure, small diameter mains are, it's based on the number of cores that you have pumping at any given time and your distance. So it ranges from 1.5 inches to like 3 inches.
I'm just, because on the old project, we know exactly where we cross the road underneath, because it's settled down. Are we gonna do anything different now than we did before?
Yeah, the directional drill.
All right. That's what people are asking about when we do that, so. All right,
That settling came from open cuts. Not to be doing
All right.
cuts on that.
I mean, that happens. I mean, even, you know, the roads that you're rebuilding are doing the same thing. That's just, Trowbridge is just not the place to have a community. It's gonna cost you extra, you know, so.
I'll make a motion that we approve the engineering study for low-pressure sewer system for the Northwest Trowbridge Park for $3,980.
I'll support it.
Motion and support. Any other further comment? Seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Kirk. Don't go anywhere. Next item on our agenda is 10C, consider the resolution authorizing the SAW grant. I know you do have in your packet a lengthy transmittal from Superintendent Page in regards to what it's for and what it has to do with the DEQ. And Superintendent Page, I'll throw it to you.
Okay, as I mentioned before, I'm applying for a Department of Environmental Quality and Michigan Department of Treasury, Michigan Finance Authority, Stormwater Asset Management and Wastewater grant. The state, there's actually statewide clean water bond initiative passed, I don't know, several years ago. And the state has been holding the money and trying to devise the most effective way to dole it out. So they finally have decided to start, you know, this year, or actually 2014. It requires, obviously, an application, and there are lots of conditions to the application. It's very similar to the DWRF projects we've applied for in terms of the paperwork you have to fill out. What I'm requesting tonight, and this is required, the application is due December 2nd. Included in the application has to be an authorizing resolution. So that's what I'm requesting tonight. So basically, the township, and it's kind of lengthy, but basically, you're saying that we will accept the grant and that we will use the grant only for the purposes that we state in the application, and that if we don't use it, we have to pay it back. It also requires an authorized representative, person to do the paperwork, which I'm suggesting would be me. Let's see, what else? And it also, you have to decide what exactly, it's available for, looks like 5 different types of activities. And I'm establishing a stormwater management plan and establishing an asset management plan for wastewater. And there's also a not-to-exceed amount that I'm suggesting be $1 million. I haven't finished the application yet. I'm only up to like 166,000. But the whole point of this is, you know, you'll get, if the application's approved, you get whatever you ask for. So the point is not to, you know, if I put in, say, $100,000 and I'm asking for $200,000, then I'm only going to get what I asked for. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. But again, the main purpose of this is the state is trying to basically jumpstart asset management in the water and wastewater. So they're giving people money to do it. And of course, the whole point of doing that is to, well, there are a couple of points. One is to, it's basically an environmental initiative. We want clean water. So we don't want to be, you know, discharging unclean water back into the environment. Secondly, the purpose of asset management is, again, it's going to help me and others and you to know how to fund replacements and improvements and operation and maintenance as well. It's just you have to document your assets, first of all, do an inventory. You have to do an assessment of your assets. What condition are they in? Thirdly, you have to determine the level of service you want to provide. So, in other words, do you want this main to last 20 years, 40 years, or 50 years? Thirdly, you have to, all this helps you determine the cost of doing that. So again, we'll be able to come up with a better guess of what our future costs are going to be. And actually that's part of basically we're signing a contract with the state. So it says we have to actually do that. But and part of what we are required to do is to fund it. So I'm also requesting a review of our funding. So, and again, we'll get reimbursed for that. So in other words, again, we'll just have a more definitive way of looking at our costs, future costs, that we can document, and that the state says that's absolutely the way we want to do it.
And as a point of clarification, Kurt, you have in there not to exceed $1 million because you don't have the final cost that you're asking
Correct.
for yet. You'll have those. You
But
have
this-
to have
this
those put
resolution is
together by
requi-
December 2nd when you
Yes.
submit this grant proposal. We
Right.
won't be meeting before then.
Right.
If it comes out to be $500,000, then we would have to be $50,000 match to
Right,
get
there's a 10% match, yes.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
Questions for Superintendent Page? Lynn?
Does this then includes the software you were talking about to be able to map all of this and catalog it and
Right.
date it? And
Right now, I'm looking at, I've got pricing for, I've already purchased an upgrade to some existing asset management software. I'm also, I just got pricing on GIS software. And I'm trying to get pricing now on actually handheld data collector, so we can go out in the field and actually record our assets and the geographic location of them, which will interface with the GIS software, which interfaces with the asset management software that I already have. And you recall when I purchased that upgrade, I mentioned the GIS, and I was going to defer that to the future just because of the cost. But since that's available for grant funding.
so it is in this
Right.
package. It's in this.
Right.
It'll be in
Another
there.
thing is, it looks like what's going to happen is, I'm certain that there's going to be more applications than available funding for this year. So what's going to happen is basically there's going to be a lottery so either we win the lottery or we don't. So, but what happens if you don't get this year's funding, it spills over into next year, so. So what
Dan?
I'm saying is I won't necessarily do everything right away.
Right. Dan?
I'm just curious as to why we didn't apply for this earlier.
It just became available.
But didn't Ishpeming just do it in September?
Not this.
They get a SAW grant?
No,
They didn't get a SAW grant?
no, the last, I'm assuming you're referring to the cartograph software upgrade?
No, I remember seeing in a paper about the Ishpeming Council moves,
We knew about it, but there was no application. You know, there was a statewide committee. In fact, one of our consultants was actually on that work group committee. And the DEQ officials, Finance Authority officials, and they've been working on this for years. And they've been meeting, and they've been developing this program so that it didn't actually officially get released until, I don't know, October, early October, mid-October. Because they kept, you know, massaging it, and so.
I don't recall what that was that Ishmael had, but I suspect it had something to do with their failing systems. They were in the process of having failure, so.
Are you talking about that article in the paper about reference to GEI? Or, yeah. Yeah, and they were doing it for several communities, yeah.
I just find it hard to believe that they, for some reason or other, that they would give you just 2 weeks to get a grant together. That just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, they didn't. Like I said, I've been working on it, you know, since October.
Oh,
I'm just saying the final program was released in October. I mean, there have been like DEQ workshops. You know, I've known about it for quite some time. Again, because, you know, our consultant was on the work group, so, you know, they would send me emails about, you know, this is coming, that's coming, so. It's just that the deadline is December 2nd.
Program is the state passed legislation wanting to, of the water coming out of municipalities to be clean and going into the lakes, basically. And they knew that municipalities couldn't fund it, so they came up with this grant program and a 10% match to entice communities to come on board, basically, and apply for the grant funds. And it's, as Rick mentioned, it's very similar to what the drinking water revolving loan funds, where you fill out the application, you have to have a project before you can submit the applications, you have to do some of the engineering that ahead of time. But then it's, as you said, it's kind of a lottery, because what they do is they then go on the checklist, and they, a group that sits down and evaluates all of them against what the condition of the current system is, and they try to get to those that, get the money to those that are in the most need of doing it from the standpoint of runoff and water treatment. And if you don't, if you're not successful in the first round, there's a second round and a third round, but those are years apart. So.
my question basically though was just that, you know, I wish, as far as, I just wish that if you were, you know, starting working this in October, you would have told us in October rather than 2 weeks before the deadline. So, you know,
There's been discussion at several board meetings about the program.
well, I don't ever remember any discussion about us applying for this.
No, it's been quite a while ago, first notice of it.
Other questions?
There might have been
Ernie?
discussion here at the board level, but it's been talked about quite a while.
Go ahead, Ernie.
Just a question to make sure I understand. We're just talking about doing an asset management plan for both the wastewater and stormwater, and that's it, just the plan.
Well, it's asset management for wastewater and a stormwater management plan for stormwater. So in other words, we don't own
Assets,
stormwater assets, so.
That's all we're talking about at this point in time.
And we're talking about grants. There are also loans available under this program.
But we can't apply for the loans, his transmittal reach can't apply for the loans until
Right.
after you've already put your asset management plan into place.
So if we move down the line and we are successful in obtaining X number of dollars, we're gonna have to come up with some matching dollars from somewhere and that.
Right.
And do we have to then go out on bids on this? Or do we have a
No.
firm already lined up?
Well, I'm getting proposals right now for purposes of filling in, because when you fill out the application, you're required to put cost. Okay, so in order to get cost, you have to get quotations. But unless it's, you know, like over $50,000, you're not required to. Plus, I'm not constructing anything. Okay, so it's like software. And actually, and I haven't computed this yet, but we can actually get reimbursed for work that we do. So in other words, collecting, you know, we'll be, once we have this equipment, we'll be collecting the data to implement this program, and we get reimbursed those costs. I can get reimbursed for my time for applying, so,
Your administrative costs can be covered.
correct, yeah.
That too. Is there a percentage of that, or is that total administrative?
Well, it's just all, you get like one grant, so, and it's a 10%, like as of today, assuming I didn't get any more cost in my application, it'd only be $16,000 local funding. And that'd be spread a number, you know, from different categories.
2004, we've been funding stormwater. We've got a fund balance of about, well, estimated at the end of this year, about almost $66,000 set aside in a stormwater fund. But we've been kind of putting money ahead, knowing we were going to be at a point eventually with growth, we were going to have to do something, required to do some kind of stormwater management in the contract.
I know it's been sitting there for a number of years.
And that's one thing that I would be doing anyway, so. And actually, I do have the cost for that, yeah, which is actually different than what I put in the budget. But it's $26,000, which is, you know, we've got like $70,000 in that fund already, so,
I think about 74,000.
right. And that would be, again, reimbursable. So that particular project would cost us $2,600.
So I'm looking through the actual documentation here, and it talks about the purpose of this agreement is to provide funding for the project named below. We really have nothing named below, so I'm assuming it's for the wastewater asset management plan you're looking for and the stormwater management plan.
Right.
That's gonna be the projects you're talking about.
Correct.
Okay.
That is, I checked the boxes there
It's
later.
on the resolution.
First page of the resolution towards the bottom of the page.
Whereas the municipality is hereby determined it is necessary to, one, establish an asset management plan, and second was establish a stormwater management plan.
And also, I have to include the second part, which is a grant agreement. It's a sample grant agreement,
Yeah. it's the
so I
same.
don't have the grant yet, so therefore there's no agreement. But this has to be, so in other words, you're agreeing that if and when we do get a grant, this agreement would have to be signed.
Right.
So that's why you need this resolution.
Other questions? It's gonna be in a resolution format if we have the motion to utilize the resolution authoring the SAW grant agreement.
So moved.
Second.
And it should probably also read the matching funds, that we're approving the matching funds as required if we were to receive the grant.
Yeah, I think the resolution states that,
Okay.
and I'll type that in.
Okay.
And you'd authorize also the superintendent to authorize or execute the grant. Is that amendment right there? Yeah.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Clerk Rattari?
Trustee Pompey,
Yes.
trustee LaRue,
Yes?
trustee Duran,
Yes,
treasurer Johnson,
Yes.
clerk Rattari is yes, and supervisor Hamilton. Motion carries. Well, Kirk, we'll all get together and we'll get it typed up and go.
Okay, thank you.
When you finalize it, Kirk, I would appreciate, as a courtesy to the board, if you just made that copy available, sent it out to the board so they can see what exactly it was
The
you were.
application, yes. Yep,
Okay, thank you.
certainly.
That does have to come back to the board again to be finalized, doesn't it, Kurt?
No.
Contract?
No.
But, I mean, the contract itself,
If we were awarded the grant.
Oh, the contract, yes.
yes.
Or the agreement, yes. Yep.
But I think just for the board's knowledge when it goes in, just to see the dollar amount that you came up with on what it was you were looking for and what type of matching grant you were looking for as well. Or
Right.
match to the grant. would be great.
Dennis?
yep.
I don't see the 10% reference in the resolution, so I don't know if we want to add that so that we know that we have to.
He's going to add it to the motion.
Can add it
Oh,
to the
okay,
motion, yeah.
okay. Thank you.
If there's nothing else, the next item on our agenda is the manager's report.
Apologize, I have the manager's report in the packet, I did send it out to you Friday. I trust all the board members received it, it's a two-page report. I really don't have a whole lot to add to it, other than we do, have gone forward because we're getting close to the end of the year and we have some budget cycle requirements. I do have a public hearing, advertisement going in the Mine Journal this Friday because it has to be 7 days, at least 7 days prior to the point where you're going to have a budget hearing. So I'm gonna get that out of the way first. I'm identifying the December 3rd meeting as a potential budget hearing meeting. If that doesn't occur, we can amend that by public notice to make it the following meeting on the 17th. But in any event, that's the schedule that I've laid out based upon where the board was at our last board session. The only thing I'm aware of that still is in contention is the utility rates that the board has to set. My understanding is that we have essentially a consensus budget on the remainder of the items. That's what I have set in tentative schedule. I did discuss it with Phil Secretary and Supervisor Lehman before putting it together. Corridor committee meeting, Jason and I participated in the last meeting of the US 41 Corridor Committee. At that meeting, we presented the preliminary site plan. I'm saying preliminary because it was the day before the planning commission meeting. Presented to the committee the preliminary site plan. They really had no issues with it. The only concern that was raised was with the location of the existing driveway connection to US 41 in the center of the lot. They suggested that that be straightened out, widened slightly, which we agree with, and that's something we'll probably be doing anyway. MDOT did indicate that they may be requiring the KBIC to do a traffic impact study, which is something that had not been brought up previously. That's not between us and the KBIC. That would be in the permitting process after we approve the site plan. When they apply for the permit at MDOT, they may be required to do a traffic impact study. Catch the Christmas Spirit event is coming up, as Clerk Rattari mentioned. We've moved our meeting back to 7:30 to accommodate our ability to participate in that. It starts at 6 o'clock at the Westwood Mall in the parking lot, same location it was last year. The tree will be erected the day before, and we'll be ready to go then on that evening of December 3rd, Tuesday evening. So we're inviting all the residents. Public notices have been put out. Media announcements have been put out, and we'll start entering those pretty quickly. Supervisor Lehman, Planner Charlie and I have been involved in ongoing discussions regarding the every truck haul routing issue that affects Marquette Township as well as the city of Marquette and most other communities all the way out to Humboldt. The current discussion is regarding the feasibility of a potential routing that follows the We Energy Ashhall Road that comes out to Wright Street just to the north of the existing Florida Lake Power Building. There should be a new intersection to Wright Street that is being looked at for feasibility at this point. We don't know if it is feasible or not. Several other fallback positions are also being looked at. Our position remains solid that the city of Marquette needs to have a route through its own jurisdiction for the eastbound and southbound truck traffic that is coming from the north. That's an issue that they need to deal with. With regard to the MTA Educational Conference coming up in January, reservations have been made for all of the board members. Rooming accommodations have been made. If anything is to change in your plans at this point, you could let me know as early as possible so we can cancel those reservations and make them available to other attendees. Last week I attended the MERS board meeting. As you know, MERS is the entity that has our retirement plan. I do sit on the MERS board representing employers in the state of Michigan. We currently, as of September 30th, have $8.33 billion invested in our retirement fund. That's 94% funded. You see a lot of media reports about underfunded and unfunded government retirement systems. We're at 94% right now. Our particular fund for Marquette Township, our specific fund, is funded at 84%. So we're not in any danger of defaulting on retirement, either in the retirement system or in our own retirement account. Legislative update. I did not include legislative updates because I saw that you had been distributed the MTA Insights, which had all of the current legislative information on there, and the ZBA has not had any hearings scheduled recently. So any questions the board members may have, certainly be happy to answer.
The old township sign, and we get time to talk to you about that. At the old township, it says the sign right on the corner, are we gonna get that done or wait in spring?
That will be taken down as soon as we transfer ownership of the property.
Okay. Thompson Theater, people are asking how that's going, when,
They are,
it's cold.
it's like an anthill over there. They're working very diligently to try and get that closed in before the onset of serious winter weather, so we continue working through the spring. They are still on track for their May of 2014 opening.
You said already AutoZone was open?
It is now open.
Thank you.
Now, one interesting point, important point to gather on is the way that site was designed with Glenn McCarthy is that it will be retaining all of its water on its own site. There will not be any discharge coming onto that site any longer. You'll remember that intersection of Brooklyn Road and Commerce Drive was generally pretty icy. That was because of runoff that was coming off of that site. They have underground containment as well as moving the water away from that edge. Plus, they've armored you've noticed they've armored surrounding areas
Right.
with pretty heavy-duty rock, so we should not be encountering any runoff down there any longer.
Great.
Other questions from Randy? Lynn?
I'm just wondering where we are with the township hall, the old one.
We're likely going to be transferring in January. The purchasers wanted to hold that off until the beginning of 2014 for tax purposes.
Okay.
So it's still on track, still at the same price, and the purchase agreement is pending. As we get a little closer, probably to your December 17th meeting, I'll probably be sending you copies of that to take a look at. The purchasers do not want it released publicly at this point. Probably to
Do we have anyone interested in the Big Rock property?
Yes, we do. Our issue with that right now is we're waiting for the survey to be completed. The road commission, when they did their construction, one of the requirements was they were gonna give us a survey, a new survey of that property, so we can get it appraised and get an actual value for it. We can't get it appraised without the survey. So we're waiting on that right now. In fact, I turned it over to our in-house bulldog, or pit bull, whatever you wanna call her. But at any event, the deputy treasurer is now working directly with the surveyor at the road commission to make sure that that gets done. And it's been put off now for quite some time with other projects. And the email that I saw, this is Tuesday, it must have been Friday, the email came in with a deadline on it. So that should be done quickly, and yes, we do have an active purchase.
Dulcie has been doing a real good job of getting on it. We do have a purchaser, like Randy said, and it's been out of our hands. I mean, we would have just as soon have sold that property a year ago. And luckily, we still have a purchaser who is interested after all this time, who certainly has expressed a great deal of frustration. And I understand his frustration because we share it, and it's a matter of we just can't move forward until we have the survey complete. And Dulcie's got an email chain going that goes out every few days just as a reminder that we're still waiting. And she's contacted enough people to where it would appear that they were sitting down with the attorney, I believe, this week. We think we will have a resolution shortly.
Once Dulcie became a level 3 appraiser, she had a little heavier bat this time.
Yep.
Have we decided how we're gonna handle the leaf and metal and all that pickup yet?
We, in fact, I had discussion last night in Walmart with an individual who is interested in working with us to provide a location, provide a site for the first Wednesday drop-off. We do not have a good site as yet for the general brush drop-off. I was talking with our staff this morning about that. We're still looking, along with Jason, to try and locate a piece of property that would be suitable for that. We've got several locations in mind. The biggest concern that I have is I want it to be easy access, particularly from Trowbridge. I don't want to have to cross the highway. I don't want to have to run down the highway. We've got a lot of sites identified, but it meant getting on US 41 to get to it on the south side of US 41. Crossing at Commerce isn't a big problem. We've got the traffic light, but then, where do you go? It's a long way before you can get to trying to look at someplace right here in the central core, close to Trowbridge, for that regular brush drop-off. Supervisor Lehman and I have talked about several options for that might be a little bit different than what we've done in the past, a little more controlled. But we're working on that. I do believe we have a solution for the first Wednesday drop-off.
Anything else, Ernie?
No, that's it.
Anyone else? I see Manager Gerard did make a effort to put a few more things into his manager's report, and I'll thank him for that, and I appreciate the questions that came forward for him. So as we ask more questions, maybe they will come to light with him, more of the items that he should perhaps include on a regular basis, and everybody will be a little bit better informed.
I think this is great. Great job, Matt. Come through.
Great.
Yeah.
It's a good comment. Thanks, Ernie. Next item on our agenda is 10E. It's the December 3rd meeting time Clerk Rattari was concerned with.
Yeah, we have the Christmas event starting at 6 o'clock over at the Westwood Mall parking lot. And I know we usually board members would like to go over there and attend, and it'd be pretty tight for us because to get back here for a 7 o'clock meeting. So I suggest that we move that meeting back to 7:30 and to give everyone a good hour to be there and enjoy the festivities. And you got a half hour to get here. And so that's my suggestion. I'd make a motion to do that.
A motion and support. Any board member concerns, comments, questions? Seeing none, we have motion and support to move the meeting time on December 3rd from its normal 7 p.m. start back to 7:30 p.m. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
I will notify the public.
Will you put that in the paper then too?
We can, I'll put it on the website, and we'll do as much as we can, and push that back. We know people know.
Should be able to hit the bills, too.
Yeah, we can do that too, yeah. Actually, yeah, in the calendar, we can do that.
Maybe put it in red or stars or bold or bigger.
Well, yeah, bold or something, I'll talk to Lois about that.
We can also send out a modification to the press release that we've done to the Christmas tree lighting, indicating to accommodate the board meetings and do back to 7:30.
Well, it accommodates the public, too, if they want to be able to attend our meeting
Right.
Well, that's the whole point.
and the catch.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is for people really to attend the event.
Both, yeah. Or, yeah.
The next item on our agenda is 11, public comment. Those members of the public wishing to make comment to the board may do so at this time. Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move into our forum discussion. Begin with item number 12A, continued budget work session in regards to public works. We left off previously with the discussion focused on both water and wastewater proposed fees. You do have your completed budget packet book. I think that the only points of contention remaining in the budget were the fee structure requested by Superintendent Page. Trustee Pompo offered up the solution to move to a 3% increase for the next 3 years, I believe was the suggestion. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was contingent upon he was hoping that Kirk would be able to rework the current proposal in light of the fact that the proposed rates were to change on both water, wastewater, and Treasurer Johnson had mentioned the 25 cents on garbage. Kirk had proposed a water volume rate increase from $6.73 currently to $6.97 for 2014. He'd also proposed a wastewater volume increase from $10.52 per 1,000 gallons monthly to $12.16. The board had asked him to go back and rework those numbers and suggest changes if it was feasible in order to adopt the budget and move forward. Superintendent Page, if you would go up to the podium. I know that he did work them. I had several conversations with him in the last couple of weeks. And Kirk, do you want to address where we left off last time? Like I said, had to do with the rate increases that you had proposed. The request from the board was if you could hold the water volume rate to last year's at $6.73 and increase wastewater, I believe the suggestion was to $12. If you could rework those numbers and live with those, knowing that you could have up to a 3% increase for the next 3 years. I see the budget came back to us with your original proposed amounts, and I just wanted you to comment on that to the board if you would. Thank you.
I did look at that, but I also looked at a lot of other things that, I'm trying to do in relation to future expenditures. You've already approved a water reliability study. That's basically going to be an update to our master plan. The main reason we're doing that is we have to be prepared to supply water for future development. So now, because of our growth, we have to update that plan every 5 years. So what we do is we look at that, the consultants look at, with township input, so we've already had a pre-kickoff meeting with input from the planning department. I was there, the DEQ was there. And we have a lot of potential growth yet. For example, there may be a water park. There's discussion of maybe the hospital might even move out here. And other kinds of development. So, basically we looked at, the Planning Commission's updated future land use plan. And then we also look at, okay, what are the deficiencies that we have in our system right now to meet that demand? But that work has only just begun, so, it's not even due to be completed until the first of the year. I'm doing the same thing basically with the study that you approved tonight. We're going to look at cost, for sewers in Trowbridge Park. You previously approved a study to look at water and sewer for South Vanderboom, Grove Street, and Grandview Circle. And basically, there are just too many variables, so I would not be comfortable backing off my original recommendation. So I could say, okay, yeah, we could go ahead and drop the rates, but then, when I get all these reports back, okay, we'd have to, possibly jump back up again. So my recommendation is the same as it was previously.
Thank you. Questions for Superintendent Page?
But I could, as I said before, I am comfortable with, if you want to go with, minimal rate increases, I could live with that.
With the board's objective of offering some stability to stabilize the rates so that we're not moving them up, back down, and up again.
Correct.
Year to year.
But using my proposed rates as the base rate.
Thank you. Questions for Superintendent Page? Pete?
With the suggestion that we do a 3% each year for 3 years, how would that affect it with your future planning in that?
Up to 3%.
Well, it should be, yeah.
Up to 3%?
Yeah, it should be doable. I provided the DEQ just did early this year, they did a rate survey of the UP. And the last one they did was 5 years ago. Marquette Township, over that 5-year period, for water and sewer, only worked out to a 10-point-some% increase. So
Over 5 years.
over
yeah.
5 years. So,
That was the
That's
one
what
that
we've
I
been doing.
sent out to everybody, if you guys remember that, yeah.
so I think it's doable. Plus, with this asset management plan, even though I'm only getting grant funding for the wastewater portion, I'm obviously gonna do it for water as well. So that's gonna assist in defining cost a little bit more accurately as well. All I'm saying is I'm not there yet.
Okay. Other questions? Lynn?
So what you're saying is you're doing a 3.5% increase on water volume base rate and a 15.6% wastewater volume increase. Those are the two biggies I think we're looking at. We really didn't talk about the other individuals, trying to think if that's hookups. On-meter permits mostly, and meter replacement. So we really didn't touch on any of that, other than Treasurer Johnson mentioning the garbage collection. So.
Yeah, those other fees are basically cost-based. I mean, that's, so.
Okay. So these are the only two that we're really in contention with, right?
It's my understanding.
Okay,
I mean,
that's the way I understood it
I'm not
too.
real clear
So
what the condition is, but.
if we were to say we want a 3% increase in those two areas, obviously you wouldn't have enough based on your current budget to cover the loss in the wastewater. Did you have, is there a methodology to the amount that you came up with the wastewater? It being so much more than does it have something to do with the grants or some of the projects you're trying to do that you felt
No.
that this had to be
It had to do,
15.5%?
no, it had to do with the projected use, basically.
And because there's less
Right.
using it. Okay.
Because as it turns out, the average wastewater use is actually declining more than the water use is. Because more and more people are, we've always offered the option to have basically an outside meter. So you're metering all your outdoor use, it's not going to the sewer, for gardening or car washing or whatever. More and more people are doing that now. So that's why that first comparison bill I gave you, and everybody's going, well, I use the same amount of wastewater as I do water. Well, I'm sure you do, but a lot of people are not doing that, including some major users. So it does have an impact.
So there really wouldn't be any way, in your mind, to make this a 3% increase on wastewater? If the board were to say, no, you're gonna have to go back, and we're gonna stick to 3, or maybe even 2, or whatever, because we said, I thought Trustee Pompo said up to 3. So you're saying that this would really compromise you by not having that much of an increase
For this year?
for the wastewater? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, when I went back and revisited, like I said, it was harder. I could not find a way to reduce the wastewater rate. Plus, that's an increase compared to last year, which last year, we cut it $1.50 or $1.48 per 1,000. So we're basically back up to where we were.
If
And I think that was kind of your intent, was to stabilize the rates.
Correct.
And what I'm saying is, I can't accomplish that, because basically that's what we have been doing. They have been stable, but there have been minimal increases over the longer term.
So if we were trying to implement a 3% or whatever percent increase, you're saying we should do it for 15?
Correct.
Starting then?
Yep.
So I threw this out last time. A 3,000 gallon user is gonna see a 63-cent difference in their bill with 3% increase, and the 673, from 673 to 697 is just a little bit more than 3%. So that's gonna be a 63-cent difference for the water volume, pardon me, to an average user. And then sewer is going to, or wastewater is gonna go up 96 cents for an average 3,000 gallon user. So you have $1.59 more per month on 3,000 gallons, as it stands right now. I take that back, not as it stands right now. That's on a 3%. But Superintendent Page is saying that we can't do that, so it's gonna be more than $1.59 increase. Because it's a 15.6% increase from currently to his proposed wastewater volume. So it's gonna be significant.
It's similar to where it was 2 years ago. Last year, or 2 years ago, it was $12 per thousand. The board lowered it to $10.52 for 2013. And now he's asking for an increase back to the $12 plus 16 cents. What we're talking about is trying to stabilize the rate so that we don't go from $12 to $10.52 back to $12.16, higher sales and lower it again the following year. It's to maintain it, because the biggest struggle we have is the board members' concern with folks who say, well, it went up again. Well, yeah, but we lowered it last year. Nobody remembers that you lowered it last year. The long-term increase was 10% over 5 years. The city of Marquette's for the similar time period was 40% increase in their utility rates. Yes, they're cheaper than we are because they spread it out over more residents, but they had a 40% increase in 5 years. We only had a 10% increase. So we have been relatively stable over the long haul, but for the short term, we've jumped up and down. And I think if we, like Dan's suggestion, to try it at $12, which was where we were at 2 years ago, and that's what Kirk attempted to do, was to just try to get it even to work at $12.
And we did revise the average bill, which is in your the handbook that was passed out.
Yeah, it's in there.
So in other words, it was all the rates and based on 4,000 gallons for water and sewer. And it's less than $3 a month increase over 2 years ago for everything.
Must be in the front.
The old one's still in the pad. Books with the water and sewer. But when you look at where he put it in at from 2013 to 2014, the difference in month based on average use of water, average use of sewer went from 94.77 to 99.81.
Which one are you looking at? Trying to find?
Right after that fee schedule, before that general tab, just go back a few pages
Which
before that
one?
general tab.
On the
In that
water?
very first section, under the miscellaneous information.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I just picked this up today, so I haven't had a chance to really go through it.
Actually, I just grabbed it today too. Lois, do you recall where that history sheet went? It was going to be in the book. I can't put my hands on it right now. I've got a separate copy.
We don't have an updated one. Putting both at 4,000 gallons. But even with it, I mean, the one he gave us with the average of water, average of sewer, that was a $5 a month increase, $60 a year. But if you compare it to what was it 2 years ago, it was probably within the 3% increase or less.
Actually, I don't,
Dan?
Okay, last time we discussed this, you said that you could live without increasing the water. You made that comment.
I did.
And I made the compromise of saying, if we move it back to the wastewater back to the rate it was in 2012, which was $12. Somewhere along the line, and in fact, I believe it was Kurt that made the motion, or made the suggestion back in last year's budget session to drop it down to 10.52. As a board, I think we probably made a big mistake, but I don't think we'll ever make it again, but we do that. If we would have left it where it was, we wouldn't be in this discussion that we're having right now, as far as I'm concerned. That was my reasoning for bringing it back at $12, or $12. But now you're saying you can't even make it on 12, you have to have that 12.16? You have to have that extra 16 cents?
What I'm saying is, because of the uncertainties of the future, okay, things that I'm looking at right now, but I don't have that information back, I'm not comfortable doing that. That's what I'm saying. And I'm agreeing with you that we should not reduce rates. And what I said at the previous meeting, I was talking about water only. You know, at that point, based on my projections, which were basically an increase in water use, I could have lived with keeping that rate at last year's level, but not the wastewater. And all I'm saying now is I'm leaving my recommendation, you know, the way it was originally. That's my comfort level. And I can live with stabilizing of the rates for 3 years.
I guess I want understands that what you're saying is you can live with the water rate without increasing it? Is that what you just said?
No, I think you just said that doesn't meet his comfort level after you reviewed it
Well,
again.
I heard you say that was your compromise, but that isn't a compromise because you haven't come off of what you were before. So it's really not a compromise in my book. I mean, that's,
I don't recall talking about a compromise, but
Randy?
Yeah, I guess from my standpoint, as the budget manager, Chris and I have talked about this, and the concerns that I have looking forward, I mean, that all of the new construction that we have is being designed to use less water, including our own buildings. I mean, we've built all kinds of water conservation issues into this, so we're reducing our wastewater. Our costs of treatment facility are not reducing, they're going up. So we've got an inverse plane, and we're projecting that that's going to continue. The construction that we've got going on right now, until up the SkyStar building, is going to be very low water use. Thomas Theaters isn't going to use very much water. It's a $3 million, $3+ million construction project. It's not going to use much water. The retail sector doesn't use much water other than hotels and restaurants. And we don't have many of those, like I said, until up the SkyStar building. Then we're going to get into residential. We're going to get into some kind of an amenity. The bigger issue that I'm looking at going forward is not being prepared for future growth. I mean, right now, we're at a disadvantage with the bid for Big Light Point. We didn't finish our water project, and we're not extending wastewater. Two critical elements that there wasn't at. The capacity to provide new utilities. We can't do it right now without finishing our second phase of the water project. That's what Kirk and I are looking at. Where are we gonna be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, in position like we did with where we're at right now, the DDA district, ready for the growth that pops up and we're in competition for immediately. I can't see reducing rates, I just can't see it. Every community around us is raising rates dramatically. Chocolate just did, they added $1 a month for wastewater last night. You know what's happening to Ishmael and Megami. They're all now reaping the benefits of not doing what Kirk is trying to do and what your ordinance tells you to do. So I guess from a budget management standpoint, I agree with Kirk. You should not, if you're gonna do a percentage increase, you should adopt what he's recommending this year and then use that as your
I do want to make a point of clarification on something you said. I do not want it to be misconstrued. If Duke Life Point was interested in the township, we would be able to meet their water and wastewater needs.
That's out there already.
But I just want to make sure that that point of clarification stands. If they were interested in locating into Marquette Township, we would absolutely be able to meet their water and wastewater needs, but it would mean that we were moving forward on completion of our well project as well.
There are people in Lansing that are saying we cannot support Duke Life Point. And that's absolutely not true. We have every bit as good, if not better, fire department than the city of Marquette does. We have the police protection. We have the facilities right here in our central core. The only thing that we might be lacking is, as Supervisor Linder mentioned right now, is the water quantity that they may need, but we have the well. All we have to do is connect them. So in answer to those questions that are out there in the community, if Duke Life Point came to us today and said, we want to build in your township, by the time they were built, we'd be ready to go.
But I appreciate your comments on where you're at from as a budget manager standpoint. We can't sit here at an impasse. You've heard his recommendation. The board can certainly move forward without moving those rates, put the rates where they want. All you're doing is asking Superintendent Page to not fund something, you heard where his comfort level was. But we've got to move forward. And he did look at it for 2 weeks after the last time we met. He did agree to go back and rework the numbers. You've heard what he said. It is outside of his comfort level with what he knows is on the horizon, or what he anticipates is on the horizon. He can live with the 3% moving forward. It's just a matter now of where the board's going to take it in this direction. Clerk Rattari?
Yes, I came up with kind of that compromise we talked about last time, and if we look at 5 years, we've only went up 2% a year basically over those 5 years. And I guess my compromise would be is if we went to these rates as established, I would only go at a 2% increase a year instead of 3. And that would, I think that would be more palatable for people, if needed.
Starting when?
And 15.
Based on leaving the rates the way
Yes.
Superintendent Page
I
said.
would move them to where they are proposed to be, and then moving forward, if needed, do a 2% increase every year. I mean, we have data from 5 years ago coming forward. It's been a 10% increase. We've had 2% a year, basically, so that's my justification for that. And I think myself, I talked to Superintendent Page, and I think I don't think it's gonna be a issue with a 2% increase. I don't think it's gonna be that bad. I think we're close to where we need to be, barring a natural disaster or something. I think we should be fine, so. I'm just throwing that idea out for the board to talk about if they like it or not, or move forward on something else. That's my comments.
Pete?
We discussed that, up to 3%. See, if we went 3% this year on the rates, last year's rates, we're only talking a couple cents. So we sort of agreed that we have to have some kind of every year piece so you can plan on. So if we went 3% now, it's only within cents of what he's asking for.
No, it's not.
It's not.
It's a difference of $1.59 versus
For water?
$5.55 for water and wastewater per month on 3,000 gallons.
Okay, correct me, what did you say?
$1.59 if we
Okay.
go with a 3% increase on water and wastewater volumes. It's $1.59 total month, and it's $5.55 if we leave it the way it is.
Okay, I stand corrected.
$60 really isn't,
But you're
or
thinking back
61.
from, you were going off of 2 years ago, Pete, with your $12, that's why. If we had left it alone and left it at $12, and if we're looking at it this time, it would be just over a 1% increase. If we hadn't lowered the rates for 2013, we'd left them at 2012 levels.
I think it's very important that we have, if he does moves ahead with these projects that we have, Because, you know, there's a lot of advantages of having sewer and water in our area. One thing just hits us all is insurance rates. Just by having it water and sewer, when you get your house insured, you can go from a 9 to a 6 on a grade, and that all depends. You could save up to 5 to 10% on your premiums just by having water. According to what company you go with, I was talking to them today. And so that's advantage that it has to move forward. We have some advantage, some benefits off of it. I think we should leave it the way it is. The only thing in his budget that I see that we negotiate or something like that is your fire protection. We just come up with that number. The last study you said was 10 years ago. You know, so I'd like to see a study done on that so we have an accurate figure of what we're talking about on that too. So, but I think that I'd vote for the budget as it is.
Ernie?
I'm sitting here listening and that, and looking at a lot of figures, maybe because of treasurer, I get a lot more figures than some of the rest of you do on that. Going back to the last budget, the last packet we had, and it showed the actual water usage to date. And Dan brought this up too. We are almost on level with our projected revenue for water at this point in time, even selling less water. We're up that there. So we're gonna be equal to or over that with the current rate, which they're looking at that. And you can shake your head, Dennis, but look at the figures. It's
Look
gonna
at the
happen.
figures. It's almost 7 million gallons less sold, Ernie. You can't dispute those figures. 7 million gallons less sold.
Look at the figures and look at the revenue coming in. I don't care how many gallons you sell, look at the revenue coming in.
But the revenue's not just from water sales.
Look at the water ones, the revenue from water was at 74%, 75%, and you got 3 months to go. in that.
72%, 3 months to go with the lowest sales months ahead of you.
And I can't see it being low sales month in that.
Wintertime?
So,
They've always
in the
been.
next 3
Historically, you
months.
can look at,
In the next 3 months in that.
Uh,
But, so I have a difficult time in looking at raising the water at that point in time. And then on the other thing, I look at water right now, and as of the treasurer's report, if you look back in the October one, you're sitting there between cash on hand and investments, $950,000 at that point in time, knowing there's some things happening. But then looking at the revenue coming in and the disbursements, it pretty well evens itself out overall coming through. And that's on water. On wastewater, you're sitting between cash on hand and investments, you're talking $1,658,000 at this point in time. This is as of October and that. Sure, there's some dollars that are gonna come out of that. And you have the building that's going up, but my understanding, they're taking part of that as on a loan, you're paying some of it up front at that point in time. But you're sitting there with an awful lot of balance here. And some of the things that Kurt brought up about the expenses that we've talked about today is coming out of this year's budget, not coming out of next year's budget. The 50,000 or the 100,000 on that grant they're applying for, true, that's sitting out there. But I can't see,
are you, let me ask you a quick question. Are you 100% funded where you should be on your retained earnings right now?
I don't know.
Sure you do. You know. You've had the numbers in front of you a ton of times, and as a treasurer, you especially have the numbers in front of you. Are you at 100% of where you should be based on the numbers that Lois shared with us that were in those funds at December 31st of 2012 from our annual audit, and what we are saying our projections tell us we should have in there? Are we 100% funded in there?
Funded for what? Retained earnings can be many different things in that. You're talking retained earning as to what projects we should be funding in the future? No, we're not. We never have. We have never addressed it in that. We tried to address it the last time and we didn't do it. in
You're
that.
sitting here saying you're talking as if we have excess money, but you know that we're a couple $1 million behind where we feel we should be in there.
That's true. But it's been carrying $1 million to $1.5 million in wastewater continually in that. And
that, you can go back in time, we'll go back into your, treasurer's report for the last 3 to 4 years, and you'll find that out. Water's the same thing. It's
So
gone.
you're right, let's spend it, and we can be where Ishpeming is today.
But the problem with Ishpeming and us is two different environments. Ishpeming's doing work now that should have been done 50 years ago. The type that they put in 50 years ago was a lot different than what we put in here. Because if you look at the oldest sewer line and the water line in the township was replaced 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, on Fair Avenue. The next oldest water line is on 41.
But if you're not gonna fund it, then what you need to do is make a motion to bring forward the ordinance. You need to change your ordinance. Your ordinance says you're gonna fund it. If you're gonna now not fund it, then do so. But as a board, we're gonna have to make a decision then to put these rates in here, underfund what we're getting recommended by our superintendent of public works. Because we'll then be asking him to violate our own ordinance, which is law, then the next motion you need to make is to bring the ordinance forward at the next board meeting and change it so that we either say we're not gonna fund the future in our ordinance, that we don't wanna fund it, or we want to underfund it, or we need to come up with our capital improvements plan and say we're never gonna expand sewer, or we're never gonna expand water, but you have to do something that puts us back into compliance. Moving forward, by underfunding the system knowingly, forcing him to knowingly underfund the system, is basically asking Superintendent Page to break the law. You better change the law, because it shouldn't be on his shoulders. That's all I'm saying.
We've been underfunding it for how many years now?
And
It's been continual.
I've argued about it year after year after year, that the board has to stop taking that action.
And if that's the case, your 1.6 million for wastewater, as far as I'm concerned, is unavailable, if you're talking about that. Completely, absolutely unavailable. And your water fund of 915,000 is unavailable for anything. It cannot be touched for anything.
Of course it can, that's what it's there for.
You either put a lock on it, or you're gonna underfund everything. You're saying, as of the, audit last year, we were underfunded. Okay,
Absolutely.
if we're underfunded, fine, let's put a lock on the dollar so we don't become underfunded. But now you're saying we can't do it.
Absolutely not, Ernie. You're talking about two completely different things. You're talking about changing how governmental accounting principles work to suit your needs, and I would be against that as well. You're not gonna lock everything into some goofy retained earnings funds that tie our hands so that we can't operate the system. That would also violate your ordinance.
So what are you gonna do?
That's not gonna bring you there. You're gonna fund the system, continue to plan for the future. You have money in retained earnings that allow you to capitalize on opportunities to fund your capital improvements projects as they become available. And you look and you have the money to do it, you can get grant funding and you move forward. But continually fighting for $60 a year to freak out about $60 a year and say we're not gonna fund something, it's $60 a year. It puts us back to where we were 2 years ago. I don't recall anyone storming the castle here 2 years ago telling us that we were throwing them out of their houses and homes. But we lowered it, now we're arguing about raising it back up again. Let's fund the system. Let's fund the future. That's what we're here for. We're stewards of the future. We have to be ready to meet those needs. Dan?
Well, I'll go back to where 2 or 3 years ago, when we thought we had this under control, when we thought we had these things set in with numbers for the, whatever you wanted, Kurt's improvement ones, and we had them set aside and had definite numbers for each one of them, and the money was supposed to go into each one of those. And then we find out this year that actually, unbeknownst to us, or unbeknownst to me, maybe because I don't realize it, the money got sucked out of those things. So if we are trying to be stewards of the future, and this is what Kurt wants for his improvements, and we were trying to make sure that the money he put in there every year stayed in those things. But because something come up that we took the money out of it, then why do we even have those in there? Because you can't budget them, you can't plan them. Because you can't, what we were trying to say is if Kurt wants $100,000 for a generator in 4 years, putting $25,000 a year in there, he'll have $100,000 for that generator, which is what he wanted. So much for this, so much for this, so much for this. But then they keep taking out of it. So it's hard for us to fathom this being stewards of the future if this is the improvements we want, but we're never going to get them because we keep taking money out of it. And every year, we have to keep increasing the rates to bring it back up just to get to that point. But if something comes up, we're going to take it back out again. So I guess my problem here is the fact that, to me, if you're going to budget for the future, you're budgeting for what you need. Then budget for what you need. Don't budget. I mean, if you're going to budget, you have to come up with the money for these improvements. Leave them there if that's what they're there for. And budget for anything that's going to happen beyond that. If you're going to keep taking money out of it, there's no sense in even having them in there. You might as well just have one great big pot saying, okay, this is for any improvement I need.
Well, he's telling you then that these are the numbers he needs to budget for what's in there. If you want to also build a contingency for the other things that come out, we're going to need to increase the rates above and beyond what he's asking for us now.
So what you're telling me then is that by giving these increases that he wants this year, we'll be able to fully fund every one of those projects that he wanted, every one of those things that he wanted. We'll never have to worry about taking anything out of it again.
Of course not.
Then why do it?
Because this is what he's telling you he needs to fund the things that are in front of you.
But
This
you're
year
not
you
fighting
had
them
the
if you keep taking them out.
opportunity to settle a lawsuit. The attorneys told you at that time you could have a $2 million liability or you could get out of it for a fraction of that cost. You would have said, we'll take our chances on the $2 million liability because we want to make sure we don't take any money out of these earmarked funds for something that we don't need for 20 years. So 9 months later, you say, well, we lost $2 million. Where would that come from? It wouldn't have been funded. It wouldn't have been in there. Those monies are in there in retained earnings funds so that you can operate a system. You operate a system based upon your ordinances, and those are developed with the DEQ, who wants to make sure that, again, you can operate and maintain, you can repair, and you can improve a system as long as you're paying your debt service at the same time. We decide how we're going to move that system forward based upon sound scientific information that says, here's where we think you guys should be growing your system. We do all those things, and Kurt comes back and said, they all have a cost associated with them. We'll spread it out over X number of years. But it's not an exact science. It's not that the generator is exactly X amount of dollars and we've been putting it in a sock drawer in a cigar box marked generator. We're putting that money aside based on sound accounting principles that say we're going to have this money in here and we'll be able to move forward. But things come up. We have a developer wants to come in and put up a hospital, for example. Should we say no thank you to your $300 million project here because we didn't set aside any money and we don't want to extend any more mains to get $300 million investment in our community? That would just be foolish. We have to be able to say, absolutely, welcome to the neighborhood. We're going to have to take some of those retained earnings and we're going to extend mains that we didn't anticipate, at least at this current time, so that we can capitalize on this moving forward. That's all this is about. If we decide that we don't want to do those things, then we limit ourselves, we tie our hands behind our backs, and we say, we're happy just the way we are, we're not changing anything, and we won't do it until we have the exact dollar amount saved up. You tie your hands, you tie this township's hands, you tie your Department of Public Works hands, and we might as well get rid of the planner, and we'll save some money there too. I mean, it's, you know, we argue about these rates, and we're talking about, you know, $5 a month for most people or less. And everybody gets it, it costs more. When's the last time you opened up the newspaper and read any of municipalities and that said that they lowered their rates? It just doesn't happen. Everybody's has gone up and they've taken substantial increases. About 100% of the time it's attributed to either they failed to plan for the future, and that's a big thing for several of our neighbors, or it's just the fact that people are conserving And because they conserve, rates go up. Rates are a function of sales. Sell less, you need to charge more, or put more people on the system.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, I don't appreciate the comment that we are not funding the system. Because when Kirk gives us 300,000 and some change that he wants for specific projects, that some of us thought were earmarked for those projects, we are funding his system. We are funding what he's asking for. Whether that money comes out at some other point for something else or not is not the statement. We are funding the system. So first of all, if we have all this grandiose idea that we are going to have this tremendous development in the township in the future, the question becomes, is 2% going to even be enough going forward? The second question is, I guess it isn't even a question, it's more of a statement or suggestion. What we're arguing here about is not raising rates, yes or no, up or down. It's about a philosophy, going back to what Manager Gerard always says, that we're going to have to figure out whether it's going to be a contingency fund that we take these $50,000 or $100,000 type emergency issues out of, and we've skirted this topic a couple, 3 times in the last 2 or 3 years. Or we do tap into these funds. Now, some of us thought, however misunderstood, that these earmarked funds were locked. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. That's what we thought. And that's why I've been trying to find out what accounts are those being moved from, only so I can get a better grasp on those earmarked accounts. How much is left in there? If you remember, we had a pot. We had $763,000 in it, and we were told that that was funding the future, and we asked, Danny asked, what is that? So they came up with some kind of structure to give us those earmarked accounts. That's what I've been looking for out of the financials. What was the discussion of that? I'd like to hear that tape. I'd like to find out when that showed up on the financials, and that's what I've been asking for. So I'll get with Lois and figure it out. But we've got to go back to the philosophy. What are we going to do going forward? 2% may not be enough on these. I mean, you're talking 60, 70 cents, 80 cents. For me, it would be a lot. From a business owner standpoint, it's going to be very significant. I purposely haven't even plugged this into my bills because I'm afraid what it's going to cost me. I don't want to use that as a determination for voting this up or down. I have to think about the residents and the rest of the taxpayers who may be businesses. I'm not using that as a basis at all. But we have to come to some kind of an agreement on how we're going to fund the future. And that's what we're not doing. And we're using the budget, not on purpose, but it comes up here because this is a philosophical question. What are we going to do going forward? How are we going to structure this and so that we can have maybe a 2-3% will work if we have a contingency fund for legal issues or emergency projects that MDOT or the Road Commission's going to come up with, or the city might partner with us. We're not structuring this right. We're trying to use a small pot of funding for the future for an emergency contingency plan or fund. And that's where the battle's coming in. It's not among us, and it's not about the rates. It's the structure of how this budget is determined. And that's what we have to decide. So whether we decide to leave this as it is and go forward, we're still going to have that discussion. And it better be before next October or November, because we're going to have the same problem next year.
The biggest struggle that we have and the biggest issue that you're struggling with is you want to change accounting procedures. And you can have Lois answer the question. I already read it to you out of government accounting manual at the last meeting. I'm not going to do it again. You don't earmark those funds. It tells you not to do it. It is not a generally accepted governmental accounting procedure. This board really wants to do it, and what you fail to understand is as you operate that system, it's one of those things that, and you can take, object to what I said, but this board did take the action 2 years in a row to not put any money into the building fund from water and wastewater. 2 budget cycles in a row, this board did. He put it in there and we said, no, we're gonna hold rates down and we're not gonna fund that. And, so we have done it. And it's not so much about funding the future, we all agree. Here's what gets me, we all agree, we don't have a problem with it till it comes to the budget time and it comes down to 2 numbers. And it's like, yeah, we wanna be able to meet the needs of the future. You recall when we did Center Street Lift Station, we had an opportunity to put something in that spurred some development, and several residents have now been able to utilize and get sewer to meet their needs as their septics failed. It was a huge fight for 6 months with this board. That was about funding the future. It's about having the money to move forward to do things like Center Street Lift Station. We didn't have to pay the whole thing. We had a great public-private partnership. Sometimes you have to be able to take advantage of opportunities, and that's what you do in your retained earnings fund. So then he makes an adjustment. If we have to go into retained earnings, he's like, this is what I'm saving for. This is where we're going. This is what the board agrees are the capital improvements projects that are necessary to operate this system, to fund, to meet our needs in the future. We don't have any problem with what he's got on that list. I've never heard anyone say, well, just take these off the list or take those off the list. We don't have a problem as a board. So we have agreed on the future. We have agreed with what our vision is, and Kirk's based his numbers on what he's heard from us as a board and prior boards on what we want to do to operate the system. It always comes back down to these numbers, and we're so worried about these numbers. It's about, these are the numbers you need to fund the things we agreed needed to be funded. And so we either, like I said, decide that we're not going to fund the future, we're not going to fund certain things. We won't, that would be not capitalizing on projects that came up, but whether it was Center Street Lift Station or anything else, we would limit ourselves to say, nope, we're not going to take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves, because we want to keep money in a lockbox and we just want a generator 4 years from now. And Kirk says, well, I might not need the generator for 7 years. It'd be better to take advantage of that opportunity now, to spend that money and partner up, and we can expand our system at an incredible cost savings what it would cost us in the future. That's what I'm talking about, locking our hands behind our backs, being able to say, yeah, let's take advantage of it and move forward. He adjusts those numbers. He looks at it and says, okay, so we spent some money out. I mean, that whole part of the retained earnings, you'll never find what you're looking for, because we had this conversation then and we kept going back saying that money's not going to be locked out into these initial accounts. It was to be used as a planning tool. It was to be used. That's why Kirk and Lois kept working it and bringing it back to the board. The board would look at it saying, I don't think this is exactly what I had in mind, and let's tweak it a little bit more. And that's why when it comes out this year, here's the dollar amount that's in the retained earnings fund. How do we want to allocate it this year? Kirk and Lois can have that conversation and allocate it in those funds accordingly, but it's not in a cigar box in your sock drawer. It just doesn't work that way. It's about having the opportunity, having the funds in there. He's not, if you want to start talking about, well, maybe we should have, $300,000 sitting in a contingency fund on top of all this, well, then we definitely need to raise the rates, at least for the short term, until we add up another $300,000 in there. We know we've underfunded it. We know when we stopped, and this was before this board, the seated board, as it currently sits, the DWRF2 project, when we stopped that was, $500,000 almost that didn't go back into Kirk's budget that was spent. We stopped the funding. He'd already expended it. He was going to get reimbursed when the grant came through. The $2 million free money went away. Kirk didn't get reimbursed. We underfunded $500,000. Then we took the action to underfund it almost $250,000 towards the building fund. We agree that these are the things we need to do, but then we're worried about rates, so we don't do them. And it's either, our rates aren't extravagant. You saw the list. We were number 11, I think, when you did it from top down based on, was it 5,000 gallon use? We were number 11. There were 10 municipalities in our area higher than us. We're not extravagant. We're not blowing everybody away with our rates here. I mean, there's 10 municipalities higher than us. Certainly, there's a lot that are below us. Generally, folks who have a lot more population. If your population's out, you spread it out over more, we can do it. These rates, I mean, we're struggling for, you know, a buck whatever on water, and if you look at what the rates were, we're talking 16 cents more than they were 2 years ago on wastewater. So for the average user, it's less than $1. We're talking about $2.50 for the average user from what they paid 2 years ago. And you know, I mean, he went back and said, I think I can make those adjustments. I like your suggestions. I think I can make it work. And I talked to him several times over that last 2 weeks. And he said, I can't in good conscience make that recommendation. I can't do it. I thought I could, and I go back through it, and I can't in good conscience make the recommendation. I just don't think it'll work. And my advice was, then don't make that recommendation. But the board's got to move forward, and I mean, if we can't continue to talk it to death, we have to come to a consensus. If you don't want the increase, throw a number out there, and know that we're underfunding it. He's going to have to do something, but then I will put the ordinance on the very next agenda because I think it has to be discussed. I think it has to be changed by this board. We're either going to tweak what it says in there, we're going to do something, because I just can't underfund something. We agree that these are the things we need to do, and then we underfund it, and I think that's a mistake. But I'd love to hear a number. I'd love to hear somebody just say, okay, the water's $6, the wastewater's $5, and you figure it out. I mean, I don't care what numbers you use, throw it out there, and let's see if we can come to a consensus with the board, and we'll move forward, knowing that we're making a decision to underfund.
Could I make one brief comment?
Sure.
That was the consensus last month.
We do have a contingency fund. Basically, I've been, for several years, budgeting 5% in all the funds for contingency. It's been as high as 10%. It's been as low as 0. 5% seems to work most of the time. And even this year, okay, in one fund, it wasn't enough because of an unusual event. So, you know, like Dennis said, if you want to increase that, then it's going to be another rate increase. But it's based on a 5% contingency, which again, in most cases, is sufficient. This year it wasn't in the water fund.
Pete?
Well, we sort of a little bit agreed that we made a mistake by reducing the wastewater. But what if we took the wastewater, went back to where it was before, garbage 25 cents. We agreed about we have some kind of a percent from 1 to 3% on the water, and 3% of the water, Lenny, is 20 cents. That's what I was talking about before, not the wastewater, the water.
Okay.
Oh, that is 20 cents. He asked for 24 cents. So if we took 3% this year, instead of agreeing to go next year for 3% this year, you'd have 20 cents, it'd be 4 cents short, so what's 4 cents, you know? But I think,
But we can't do it on wastewater because he already said that.
right, wastewater, we go back where we were before, we made a big mistake before. Garbage is 25. If we're in the city, the bags are $1.30 a bag. I was riding around the last couple weeks and see 2 and 3 bags. It'd be more than what we're paying. And the people do not like the city bags because they much rather just put what they have out there and they take it. So if you look for a compromise, well, let's say, okay, let's go 3% on the old rate and you come up 20 cents, so you're 4 cents short. I don't know that. We agree on everything except for one thing or 2 things, and if we agree that we have to do it from 1 to 3% in the next couple of years, why don't we just do it right now and say, here, this year here, we have to take 3% on the water, get the wastewater back to where it was before that we made a mistake, and add 25 cents onto the garbage.
I thought that's what we were doing, but Kirk just said that he can't make it work. He, in good conscience, that was the
Well, that's 4 cents
that was the
off, so, I mean,
consensus.
that's what I'm saying. What's 4 cents? We might as well go back to what he said to start with and ask for the full 24 cents. If we're gonna go 3% next year, or 1 to 3%, as Dan said, if we all agree on that concept, why don't we take the 3% right now, or take 3 and a point something and get them to 24 cents and move on?
What do we do with wastewater then?
Get it back where it was before, before we made the mistake by reducing it,
To $12.
$12 and some
Well,
odd.
that was the consensus. That was what we
That's what
had directed
all-
Kirk
the
to do.
consensus was we made a mistake, we should
But
go
he didn't
back
do
up
it.
there.
No, what he was told to do, and I will replay the tape for you, was go back and look and see if you can make that work. And he came back and said, I can't do it. Not in good conscience, not with what I know is on our horizon. That's what occurred. That's exactly what he said. Like I said, the board has to move forward. They have to do something, and you're just gonna arbitrarily pick a number. I mean, I like Pete's suggestion. He's throwing something out there, and if the board agrees on that, it would move forward. I will vote no against it. I'll vote no against anything that isn't exactly what he asked for. But I'm only one vote. The rest of the board, it sounds like you guys could potentially have a majority and can move forward.
But that's what I'm saying, we sort of agreed a little bit about the percent wise, so 3% is only 4 cents off, so we might as well just go with the ask for this year, and then go back to 1 to 3 for the next couple of years. You know, it's just-
But we can't guarantee next year if it's only gonna be 1, 2, or 3, or 4%. We don't know.
Every year's different, Ernie.
Yeah, I know.
It's a different world. But I mean, there's lots of things in his, I mean, Kurt, a couple of years ago, fire department wanted a truck, so we stopped charging them the 20,000 or whatever, that was arbitrarily done. You know, and that's why I say we should have a study, and he should have that locked down, not arbitrarily say, well, 20,000. It might not be fair to the fire department charging 20, it might be 10, 15%, or 1,000, you know. But he tries to lock down everything he can, and I think that if we use the same philosophy that we've been talking about, and I guess we might agree till next year to do it this year. You know, we got a lot of good things happening. Marquette Township is nothing but growing, and we have to have the structure there.
Ernie?
Looking at it, maybe I've been in government too many years in that. The more they give, the more they spend. And if you say you're only gonna give them so much, they're gonna have to cut. The question is, come back and tell us what you're gonna cut, and if we don't like it, then we have to fund it. And that. The other item is you're talking about additional development. I think this board and previous boards have come up with a new development. The people or the businesses pay for that development. They pay for putting the structure in the ground and that. So, how much that costs township, I don't really know. But, everything today, when a new business comes in, they have to come up with the dollars to do it in that. We're not funding in that. I just go back at some of the residential areas. Here on Woods is a prime example. When they tried to put in the water up there, they couldn't put the water. They had to run the water off from Wright Street. And we says, fine, but you're gonna do it at your cost. And they had to replace the whole road down there at their cost because they only wanna do part of it now. So this is the one thing you have to look at, is that the developers are paying the dollars for that. Sure, we have some administrative costs, but the greater bulk of it is coming out of the developers in that, not the township in that, because the township can't afford it in that. Even when these major big developers coming in, they're gonna have to come up front with dollars in that. We just don't have the dollars. We're not gonna have the dollars. I don't care what anyone says, unless we go out and borrow money in that. There's no way that we can put the rates high enough to generate additional retained earnings to cover all this in that. And with the one coming on, behind Lowell's, that, if they come in, they're upfronting everything too. We're not doing that. That's part of their costs in that.
So then it becomes our cost after they build it, to maintain and operate.
To maintain and operate, but by maintaining and operating, we're generating revenue from them to maintain and operate that too, so.
Depending on how much water and sewer.
Yeah,
they use,
so,
yes.
yeah. But what they put into the road is gonna last us for many, many years, and we don't have to worry about that. Even the pipes that we have in the roads right now, the infrastructure, compared to Ishpeming, Nagani, City of Marquette, and all the rest of them, ours is so far advanced over theirs that we're not gonna have to worry about like they do in that. We don't have the breaks that they do, because it's not cast iron like they did, and all that other that they ended up with, so. Whether you go with the projected rate or some other rate, I just look at some budgets I put in, and they come back and says, you're gonna have to cut X number of dollars in that to make it do, and I said, that's fine, I'll cut it, but if we can't make it, I'll be back to you and say, this is the reason why. Now you have to make a decision in that.
But you weren't operating under the same, you weren't operating a complicated water and wastewater system. You weren't operating under the auspices of the DEQ and your own ordinances either, Ernie. You were operating at Northern Michigan University, completely different thing. So I appreciate the anecdotal story, but it doesn't do anything with this. If, you know, he's already done it before, we underfunded and somehow he managed to run the system. You're right, he just didn't fund certain things. You know, that's what he'll do this time. He'll not fund to a full amount. You still are gonna pay operations, you're gonna do your maintenance, you're gonna fix things as they come up. What you're gonna underfund is future planned projects or purchases. Will he do it? Absolutely. Do we put money aside every year in that fund? Of course we do. All we're gonna do is underfund what we're putting aside for the future. All I'm saying is let's make that conscious decision, knowing that it's already underfunded from where we think it should be, and we're gonna choose to underfund it a little bit more. Let's just be honest about it so that at least when you're talking to folks, you can say, we held the rates down a little bit, but how we did it was we accomplished it by not putting away as much money as was recommended to fund future operations. Call it what it is, and then people will either say, well, that's okay, because I won't be here then and I don't care, or they'll say, you know, hallelujah, I don't care what you do as long as you keep my rates low. And, you know, I mean, it's a philosophy, and if we're underfunding them a little bit, we don't stop. The system moves on. We just didn't fund the future. And when those things come up, we don't have the money, we don't have the money.
Kind of funny that we just got through going through 3 buildings because we planned for the future, and now when we want to plan for the infrastructure, we say no. Kind of ironic.
But Pete put a suggestion out there. What's the board think about his? He said give him 3% on the existing water rates, and then what'd you say, give him $12 on wastewater and a quarter for garbage that he's asking for? Did I capture that correctly, Pete?
Yep.
So-
Wastewater back to where it was before at 12.16. The water, 3%, garbage, 25 cents.
So there's a solution that's been offered by one board member. How do we feel about that? Lynn?
That was Danny's recommendation, to have $12 for wastewater, almost a 3% increase.
No, leave the
on
water where it was
Oh,
at.
that's right, it was $6.73.
And add 3% to that. Or just go with he said for 24 cents. So you're 4 cents off.
Well, I mean, we can talk about Danny's solution. Kirk says he can't in good conscience do it. Does the board want to move forward with Dan's? Leave the water where it's at, raise the wastewater to $12. How do you feel about that one then, Lynn?
That's what I thought the consensus was at the last meeting. I agreed to that.
I didn't do it because I think it was wrong.
So what you're
But we're talking. We're
disagreeing
we're
about is the
agreed about
24
adding
cents.
3% next year, up to 3%. Well, let's take 3% this year. That'll put us within 4 cents of what we need there.
But you're adding 3% to water and 14.5% to wastewater.
You're putting wastewater back to where it was 2 years
Exactly back
ago.
where we made a mistake before. And then the garbage up 25 cents.
I won't go along with 25 cents for garbage. There's no
Oh
justification
my
for
God.
it.
Why, Ernie? If you go to the city, it's pay you more.
I'm not worrying about the city. I'm looking at the figures here at 25 cents. You're sitting there with solid waste as far as October.
It's $3 a year.
I
don't care what it is, you're sitting there with $124,000 now. The general fund owes it $180,000. And you're raising the rate to the people, for what reason? There's no justification for it, when you got this kind of dollar sitting out there.
Kirk, why do you have to raise garbage a quarter?
It's, again, it's based on our cost. You know, and actually, when I was looking at the cost, some of the costs weren't even included in the numbers I was looking at.
So we'll subsidize garbage. If we don't increase the rate and ask everybody to pay, we'll subsidize garbage because we still have to pay our garbage bill. So what we'll do is we'll subsidize it from where? The general fund? I mean, what will we be using to subsidize it? To save people $3? We still have to pay it, Ernie. It doesn't go away. It's cost-based.
Isn't it a
Listen to what I
pass-through?
just said.
Isn't it a pass-through?
It's a pass-through. And you look at the figures that's coming in every month, in and out, for the last year. It's a pass-through. And we still gained, we had 90, from December of 12, there was $95,000 sitting there. October, we got $124,000 there. And this is the pass-through stuff.
So when you asked Kirk why he wanted to raise it a quarter, what did he tell you?
What did he tell us? There's nothing written in here.
Okay, I do have to insert here, it's not a pass-through. What he's trying to fund is closure costs for the landfill, future closure costs, which could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's not a pass-through.
Well, that's what, I
And
just
this-
asked if it was. I
Yeah, and
didn't.
this highlights the discussion that Trustee Durant had. You're not a profit-making organization, you're a cost-driven organization. The only way for you to build up the kind of funds that will protect against lawsuits is a separate fund, which means more rates. I agree with Danny. Danny's comment was, every department should only be budgeting what it absolutely needs to operate. That means nothing for extra equipment, that means nothing for things they wanna buy. Do you wanna operate that way? If that's the way you wanna operate, we can. That means when things like the sled that the fire department gets offered, we don't take, because it means we'll have to expend money to buy a four-wheel and a snowmobile and a trailer to operate it. Granted, we have the Argo, let's say, to sell for, but that won't be the full cost, so we won't do that anymore. If that's how you wanna operate, we can operate that way. What we have to do is to be able to fund everything you wanna fund regularly and still have enough of a fund so when we get sued, which we do regularly because we're a government entity and we're the first target for everybody, we can defend ourselves. It's expensive. The tax tribunal, hundreds of thousands of dollars we're spending on the tax tribunal's defense of our tax base because of a Barron's decision by the tax tribunal that was against the regulations, yet they did it. So we have to take them to circuit court, and we have to take them to the Court of Appeals. We have to be able to fund that. How we've been funding it is out of reserve funds. That's where his money's been going. It's not that he's pissing it away, pardon my expression, or uselessly wasting it at the taxpayer's expense, but the money has to come back to fund the system. And the only way it comes back is through rates. So I mean, it's a simple equation. That's why your ordinance is worded the way it's worded. To give you the opportunity to operate this government as they need to be operated and have enough reserve to be able to address the unforeseen issues that come up, whether it's development or whether it's a lawsuit. Rates are the only way you can do it. Rates or millage. That's it. You don't have any other process. Millage or cap is 5 mills operating without a vote of the public. Treasurer Johnson knows that. I mean, but things like solid waste, that's not just an in and out pass-through account. We're trying to fund closure costs for the future of the landfill. If that membrane breaks out there, we've got to come up with cash for our share of the cleanup. That's what solid waste is, not just the cost of operating, it's the cost of closure as well. So those are the things that we have to deal with from the budget standpoint looking forward. And you have to deal with it politically, but your only alternative is either millage or rates. That's your only source of revenue.
Going back to what you said, trying to plan ahead for the future, and then talking about what Dennis said, we can't really plan for the future and earmark dollars for this stuff. Yeah, I just heard you say that we have to do it for closure, because we don't know what's gonna happen. So,
That's an agreement that you entered into with the landfill.
okay,
This board had entered into that agreement when the landfill was established, that you would participate in the closure costs.
Okay, then I'm gonna go back to, what is it, the early 2002, 3, 4, whatever it is, when dollars was taking out of the solid waste fund, or actually it was in 2008, 9, to pay for that road out there that dropped the solid waste cash down to next to nothing. And there was no dollars there. It was was left was the assets, and you can't sell the assets. So we had no dollars sitting there if something would have happened out there to pay for it.
That's right, there was a risk that was taken, and
Yeah.
the general fund's paying that money back.
They haven't paid it back. They didn't pay it last year.
Yes, we did last year, we certainly did. And we-
Last year, but this year we haven't seen anything come through this
the
year.
budget.
In
It's in the budget for
2013?
this year, too. On the very first page of the transmittal,
Okay.
says whatever's left over at the end of the year, 1/3 of it is going back to the solid waste fund.
Are you talking about 13 or 14?
14.
I'm talking about 13.
13, we also paid in 13.
I've been trying to find that, and I haven't found it yet, so.
It's there.
Because when we started with the budget in 13, you indicated that we weren't gonna pay anything to that because of the other things happening and that. So I haven't
Well, it
seen.
depends. By the end of the year, if there's anything left, it will go back in. In 12, we did, we had a finite.
I know,
amount that was put
I
in.
know.
I've got an amount to go in 14. But again, that was a budgetary decision that you made.
I know.
Recommendation I made, and the board agreed.
Sure, 25 cents isn't much. I'm just looking at, if we're gonna do that, and we have to fund future closure, or whatever it is, then we have to take those dollars and identify them that they're set aside for that.
So that's what the fund balance is for, but what we've done, we also have a time frame. Kirk, what's the current time frame on closure projected? It was 25 years, then they increased it to 50, then they dropped it back to 35, and then they increased it back to 50 again.
Yeah, generally speaking, they keep extending the life of the landfill, so.
That's what we're calculating.
it's hard to
our
say.
reserve on. So when we did the loan, I suggested the loan because we had a 25-year cushion. Build that back up, and we had a time frame that the general fund was gonna pay that back with interest, which we've been chipping away at.
But I'm going back, if we're gonna have to allocate dollars for that, then we have to allocate it in the accounting system that these dollars are sitting there for that reason, and they can't be pulled out for that, for anything else.
So it is, it's in the fund balance, that's where it's at, and it's allocated for that. We borrowed from that fund to do that road improvement, and we're paying it back from the general fund. Because we had that 25-year cushion.
So Ernie, where are you at with, what was the most recent one? Back to Dan's, leave the water where it's at, raise the wastewater to $12. Do you agree with that? But you're not gonna say yes to 25 cents on the garbage. Is that where you're at?
I'm just bringing it up for discussion. 25 cents isn't a lot. I'm just looking at the dollar sitting here, and the people out there start looking at these reports and that. I've got to come up with some reason from my own perspective to be able to talk to them and say, this is the reason why we have this big $100,000 balance sitting there, and it is increasing every month in that.
How about the water and wastewater? Just, how about an answer on those?
I think the consensus we had last time, I agreed with that. Now we say we
If
can't
it
do
was
it.
workable, is what we said, and he came back and told you it wasn't. So it was a consensus if it was workable, right?
He
Right.
indicated that he thought it was workable, and I says, go back and give us the figures to make it work. And all I heard back is he can't make it work, so I don't know where the figures are in that, as to why he can't make it work.
What I'm saying is I don't have next year's figures. I don't know what those numbers have to be.
But like we said, he'll make whatever work you need to have work. Clerk Richard, where are you at on that suggestion?
I think I could use Pete's suggestion, but if it doesn't work, you're going 3% next year on both. So, I mean, if we wanna go 3% every year till the next rate study, that we might go down that road, but, you know, I can't see the future. I don't know what the water usage is gonna be. I don't know how many hookups we're gonna have. We're just doing projections. I mean, and that's all we can do. And you know, and I don't wanna continue this argument about, you know, what rates are and such, but for the most part, we have a lot less sewer users than water users, so it won't really I mean, a 25-cent increase on water isn't gonna really affect too many folks, because they're on the water side, but, I'm looking at myself, I don't even use 1,000 gallons a month, and I'm looking at a $24 increase a year. I mean, it's 1 hour of work for me. I mean, that's all I'm talking about. I don't wanna continue this, it's not a good use of my time to be here to do this, it's just not.
Dan?
Well, I've heard 3 different ones now, because, and I guess I'm confused on all 3 of them. I mean, there's the original one that Kurt says won't work, which I proposed. Pete wants to increase water by 25%, but bring the wastewater to $12, which Kurt's already said isn't gonna work. I got Randy's, who says, okay, give him the increase, but we'll cut it off at 2% next year. I agree with one comment that Ernie made, that you know, if we talk about Duke, Life Point, or whoever we want to talk about coming in here, I agree with what Dennis says. Yes, we have the ability to give you the water. It's just who's going to pay for it. Is it up to the developer to pay for it, or is it up to the township residents to pay for it? So we can get a developer in here. That's, to me, is the core problem on this and that end. But, you know, to move off a dead center here, because we're just going around and around in circles, I'm willing to agree to Randy's proposal. My only problem is what happens next year when Kurt says 2% isn't enough? Then we go right back to where we started from again and go through this argument all over again. I mean, if this is what we're, like I said, if Randy wants to go with that 2% instead of 3 next year, I could accept that, but what's going to happen if it isn't enough?
Good, right?
Well, my comment is, Dan, is if it's not enough, then we go 2% the next year, and we go 2% the following year. And, you know, I'm not a future, I can't see the future. I hope that's enough. But I was hoping to make a board motion, we do that, and then we're bound to it, unless we have to change it for some reason. And in good faith, we're doing that, you know, so. I'm sure it's the same for everyone. We have to move off dead center. It's not a good use of our time to sit here to do this, so. And if it isn't enough, then I guess we're gonna have to, next year, change the ordinance and say we're stuck to the next rate study. That's all I'm saying. I mean,
Well, I guess my comment is the fact that just to move this along, I'll go with Randy's motion, but I want Kurt to understand that next year he's gonna have to definitely come up with some hard facts, more than just a short narrative. I want to be able to see.
well, let me ask Kurt, because I guess I did talk to you, but, I mean, could you live with a 2% increase next year if you had to do that?
Are you doing it for 1 year, or were you gonna do it till the next rate study? That was
Well,
what the original.
it was, what it was, basically it was before, it was 3%, up to 3% until the next rate study for 3 years, which is what we're.
Yeah.
So now my assumption that we're saying is we're gonna go up to 2% until the next rate study, which is 3 years.
I mean,
Up to.
I'm asking Kirk this because he's the one that has to do it, and I mean, I don't wanna bind your hands, because if the board makes a motion to do that, you're gonna live by it, so. What is, I mean, I know you can't see the
So you're
future.
going with my proposed rates?
Yes,
Okay.
and in my
You
concept,
say leave him what he's proposing now.
my concept is leave them where they're at, proposed, in the budget, where they're at. And then we make, going forward, a 2% increase every year, if needed. I'm not saying that's a hard.
Up to
fact.
2%.
Up to 2% a year, if needed. I don't know if Kirk can live with that.
Well, I can, you know, like I said, by next year, I will have a better picture, you know, of the future.
Well, my comment is, and Dan has a very good point, if for some reason we have to go 5%, and we're only stuck at 2, I mean, can you live with that? I mean, can you make it work?
Yeah, I can make it work. You know, the ordinance is basically, you know, the part that we're talking about, you know, is the priority of expenditures. That is, and that's the part that you can't change, because that is a contract with the state. And now, tonight, you agreed again that, you know, by accepting money from the state, that we're going to fund the future. So, and that's a part that I don't know yet, for sure. So if it turns out that, and I've got 3 years to do that. So in other words, basically the contract for the asset management part for wastewater is, I've got 3 years to implement that program. At the end of that 3 years, I have to identify, is there a gap or is there not a gap? Hopefully there won't be a gap and we'd be perfect.
So after 3 years, you'll know a lot more, you're
Right.
saying?
Because you'll have the asset management program in place,
And
which will
again,
help.
plus every year I have to make decisions on, you know, what gets done and what doesn't get done.
Well, that's my proposal, Dennis.
Okay. And Dan, you agree with Randy's? Pete?
I agree.
Lynn?
Yes, I agree.
Just, what is it? So I might make sure.
My proposal, Ernie, is Treasurer Johnson, is to move up to the proposed 2014 rates as in the budget. And going forward, next budget, or to the next rate study, 3 years, we're limiting ourselves to up to a 2% increase a year on both. And that's what it is. I don't know if everyone will support it, but that's my idea, so. Well, if you got a 2% increase and it's not gonna be that much, you know, really, but I wouldn't think, if needed. I mean, we could have a real.
And it's only up to a 2% increase until the next rate study is completed, and then he can present the adjustment as he needs to at that time.
And then he'll have to stick to the 2% for whatever projects that he sees have to be done. For a year, anyway.
But it does fit in with the time frame. We've had 10% increase in the last 5 years.
Mhm.
And rates have been a little more volatile in the last 5 years.
I mean, I'm just looking for, excuse me, Dennis, I'm just looking for stability. And if someone knows you could maybe have a 2% increase next year, they got time to look for that, you know. It's this $1.50 up and down, and, you know, that's just not very good in my opinion, but that's my proposal.
Because even if you go back to our rate study, we had planned on a 5% increase, and it didn't come anywhere near that. And
No.
we ended up with additional left over, and we did not decrease the rate down by 23 cents. We left it there. So they gained that dollar amount in that too, so. So the rate study could be less, it could be more, it could be where we're at. We don't know in that.
I would just like to say, I just think for the future, I think we're pretty close to where we need to be right now. We made those increases last year, and, in the, meter sizes and hookup fees and such. But you gotta remember, the hookup fees aren't gonna happen forever, so that revenue
Right.
is gonna decline over time. And, you know, so it's kind of a,
It goes back into rates. If we stop development, then it goes back into rates to make up that revenue.
but hopefully we'll get some more folks in the wastewater system by the end of 3 years, and maybe that'll help, you know, so. But I'm just saying that, I'm just throwing it out. I think
Yep.
it'll
It's-
make everyone's life easier this time.
So you agree, Ernie, or no?
I just look at what it's gonna cost me as a retiree, and I'm looking at what I'm gonna get back from people who are gonna retire, coming back in that, and, it's gonna be a jump for them, because most of them run between 3,000 and 4,000 gallons a month, somewhere in that vicinity, and that, the ones that I know in that, so. It's gonna run them, $6, $7 a month, somewhere like that, just in water alone, in that, at this point in time, in that.
No, it should
No,
be,
it's
it
only-
should be $555 a month on 3,000,
3,000.
yeah.
And again, the
For water
total,
and sewer.
the total cost for water, sewer, and garbage is going to be less than $3 a month than it was 2 years ago.
But people don't look back, they only look now. They look when they get that bill as to what it is and that too. so-
I understand that.
Pardon?
I understand that. I do the same thing, and all of
Yeah.
my bills are going up. I mean, food and fuel, which are not quite as essential as water, but pretty darn close.
Because I know I had already had one individual talk to me about this, and I said, we're looking at, we have to go up, I don't know how much. And he looked at me, he says, yeah, my electric bills are going up 8.5% here in 30 days. I said, we can. Well, they were just talking about the current one, and I said, we can't do anything about that. That's out of our realm. But he says, it's not out of my realm when I look at my bottom line. That's another thing. So I try to damper that real quick in that, because we can't do anything about that.
Well.
I can live with it if we go with the 2% for the next couple of years of that, because then I'll bring it back down to a reasonable, and people know where they're at.
Yeah, I appreciate the stability of it. I appreciate the fact that we're going to go with the rates that are, as they're proposed this year. I don't like the 2% because I think it ties our hands. If he needed 3, we should be at 3, and I don't like that portion of it. I like getting the rates to where they're at. I think that he'll live with it because it reflects the reality of what we've been for the last 5 years, so that's a pretty good, safe assumption that he can live with it for the next 3 years. My feeling on it is I don't like to tie our hands and cap it at 2%. I was barely comfortable at 3%, but it is historically there, so if it moves us forward, I think it's a good, solution.
But we as a board, we can change that if we have to, just through another motion in that.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Yep. But it would sound to me like we're arriving at a consensus 2014 budget. And if everybody feels that same way, we won't have to schedule additional meetings, and we'll be prepared to follow the time frame that Randy had distributed to board members. Unless there's anything else in the specific budget that we still need to discuss. Clerk Rattard?
Well, we will have the public hearing, and board, at that time, the board will have their final comments on the budget. But we do need the timelines established.
We have a 7 or 8 day advertising
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. So I would really appreciate if we just gave you a consensus, and I guess if you had comments at that time, maybe you can talk about it. But I think if everyone's comfortable with it, I think we should go with it and go. I mean,
Ernie?
I just have a couple of questions for Kurt. You raised the lawn meter permits upwards and the meter replacement upwards. What was the rationale behind that?
Cost that we pay for meters.
Just the meter costs?
Yep.
Okay. They went up that much, some of them?
They haven't been raised in a while, but they have gone up, yes. Just like everything else.
Anything else? No other questions? Not seeing any, Kurt. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. You've made my day.
It would appear that, as in 12B, we do have a consensus 2014 budget. We can't take formal action to move forward on it here anyway. So
no, we'll
it'll
do
just
it.
appear at the next, on the December 3rd agenda.
It would be, on the first item on your December 3rd agenda would be.
Public hearing.
Public hearing for the budget and including taxation, for the tax budget, we do those jointly at that same meeting.
Okay.
That ad is placed to run in Mining Journal Friday. It didn't have to be in before Monday, but I ran it Friday just in case there's a glitch, whether it was last year with the Mining Journal, they didn't run it. Still gives us 3 days to get it in and still be in that February timeframe.
Okay. If there's nothing else on the budget, we'll move forward to additional comments for board members. Those members of the board wishing to make comment may do so at this time. Peter?
We're gonna get snow pretty soon, but when you're driving on the roads in the township, be careful, because you don't wanna drop off yet on the shoulders, because we have some bad shoulders over there, so be careful. And we're getting after everybody.
Thank you. Dan?
I guess I just want to comment real quick on, I suppose anybody that's been watching this can see how difficult it is to do a budget session. Your budget in your house is hard enough, but if you look at what we have to do, you can multiply it by 100. So I'm happy that we compromised. I'm happy that we work as a board to come up with one consensus thing without getting too out of whack. So it's not the greatest budget. It's going to affect some people, obviously a lot of people, but I guess until you're in our shoes, you really can't understand where it goes. So yeah, I'm sorry if some people aren't too happy with it, but it's the best we can do at this point in time. So again, I'm going to say that we work to compromise, which obviously in big government that isn't something that happens a lot of times. So I just want to comment on that and also wish everybody happy Thanksgiving also.
Thanks, Dan. Lynn?
I appreciate your comments, Dan. This is very hard, sitting behind this desk sometimes. And I appreciate that the five of you listen to me and each other. And like I said before, this is tough. And we do agree for the most part on how we feel the direction of the township should be. This is our stumbling block, but I don't think it's the rates. I think it's the philosophy, and maybe it goes back to the ordinance, I don't know. But I think we did good stuff tonight anyway. I have a Heritage Trail meeting tomorrow, so that's why you don't have anything today. The Planning Commission notes I did put in, I gave them to Randy. I really wasn't late, but it's hard to do it Wednesday and get it for Thursday's packet. It's pretty quick, but I did give it to him this weekend. And the Business Association is putting the final touches on a letter to this board, asking if we can help with the corridor, with whether it's grants or in kind or monetary donation or letters or whatever we can do. And we'd like to, we're shooting for a joint meeting the first quarter of 14, and hopefully as many of our board can show up. There's 8 of us right now. Our new election will be in January also. And they were suggesting maybe it be part of this meeting to make it easier for this board. And I don't know if, I think that would run our meeting. Personally, I don't like that idea, but that's kind of what they're kicking around. So I don't know if anybody's got any comments, or if you want to email me and let me know how you think. I'd like to see just a work session like we did before. I think that's easier. If we can tape it if we want to. You know, it's not like it can't be on YouTube or something so the public can see. But I appreciate you letting me know what you think. So we only meet once a month, so our next meeting will be in December again. So that's it.
Treasurer Johnson?
Well, I think we had a lively discussion at times, but I think a lot of us thought about it and brought out a lot of good information in that, and we got a viewpoint from everybody in that, and that's kind of the way it should work in that. We may not get what we want, but we have to come to a consensus, and we did. In the long run, hopefully it all works out to the best in that, and go forward in that. The other thing I have come up with is when you get your tax billing, there'll be an insert in that. It has to do with being able to do credit card payments. Now, the credit card payments due to the company will not be available until February in that. What they told us and what was reality was entirely different. We thought we'd be able to roll out in December. Well, according to their corporate offices, it can't be until February. So we're still starting the process of letting everybody know what has to be done so we can go forward on that. We aren't a bit happy with the corporate office for not telling us that, but there wasn't much else we could do. So you'll have that little piece of paper in there, and along with your tax statements, which will be coming out the first work day in December. And if you so inclined, we'll be able to take your dollars on that first work day of the month too. So December 2nd. So we'll be ready for you. And I'll tell you right now, there will be people by noon standing in line to pay the bill and that, which is Yeah. Yeah, so,
Is that it?
that's it.
Thanks, Ernie. Clerk Terry?
Couple items for the next meeting. It's at 7:30, remember? You got the Christmas tree lighting at the Westwood Mall at 6 o'clock, so hopefully the weather holds out for that. Next meeting, we have to, and I forgot to give this out before the meeting, but we have committees that people are expiring on that we're going to have to start filling. So I don't want to steal Dennis's thunder, but we're going to be soliciting for committees in the township. So we'll be advertising soon, and hopefully we get some people to participate. And then lastly, again, I agree with the board members, the budget process is tough, and we did compromise. But we did have good discussion, and we didn't, as I was reading my minute books before I came in tonight, when this board was seated, there was no, as I say, personal attacks as a previous board did, and other, and I think this board and its, in its discussions, we can discuss things without going down that road, and I'm pretty happy about that, so I think that's positive for everyone, so. With that, I wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, and don't eat too much turkey, because you get sleepy.
Thanks, Randy. The only comments I have, next agenda, I will be asking for an update from the fire department to update the board before the end of the year. The board did ask them to have their officer training completed, so we'll be asking Manager Gerard and Chief Sims to comment on that. Also, we're going to want to do a wrap-up on Manager Gerard's 2013 goal assessment. He had 5 goals, I think, that we had assigned to him. We got an update in August. We'll be looking for a final 2013, which will also lead us into his 2014 goals. So think back to when you did your performance appraisals. If you need more information back, we can certainly get it back to you. If you didn't keep copies of your notes of what you want to do for moving forward on his 2014 goals, we'll try to reach consensus before the end of December, or at least by the first meeting in January, about where we'd like to see him moving in 2014. That goes for you as well, Manager Gerard, that you would begin to think about what you would think your next annual goals would be important.
Do you want to see that report at the meeting on the 3rd or the 17th?
I think the 17th would be prepared to move forward, but you may want to have yours and kind of send it out to the board so that the board can think about, or send it to me and I'll disseminate it out to the board on where you think, 3 to 5 things that you think are important for you to set as action-oriented goals for 2014, and the board will be kind of thinking of their 3 to 5, and we'll do it at probably that second meeting where we'll all be able to put a consensus on, okay, here's where everybody's come together, here's the ones that match up, those are easy. Now, which ones are the other priority, and see if we can't agree, all of us, all 8 of us, on the 2014 consensus goals. That's it. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Pete already did.
Okay. All those in favor of adjourning this meeting?
Aye.